Dragon Tamer. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 276, Brute Force Resist, Show Mercy, Part 2. Liu Ming scoffed. It was just a monster. So what if a beast could wield weapons? Monkeys and gorillas could use weapons too. Knowing how to wield weapons and using them well were two completely different things. He didn't believe a wolf bear wielding a concrete pillar could replicate the swordsman's swordplay. That was pure nonsense. This wasn't Kung Fu Panda. He watched the pillar come crashing down without blinking, facing the attack head on. With a single thrust, he leaped forward over 10 meters, dodging the overwhelming onslaught like a phantom. Liu Ming dodged, but the wolf bear's wielding utility pole crashed down onto the roadside with undiminished force, cracking the concrete and leaving a large crater on the side of the road. The wolf bear missed its first strike, but it didn't give up. It continued its attack. Bang, bang, bang. It swung the utility pole with such ferocity that it looked impressive. Liu Ming remained impassive, relying on the agility of his flame dragon wing cape and flying boots to avoid a single direct hit or even a slight glimpse. Finally, the wolf bear roared and flung the broken utility pole far away, realizing that even if it died of exhaustion, it would still be unable to harm the slippery human. It abandoned its upright attack and, dropping to all fours, lunged like a raging beast, roaring and lunging towards Liu Ming. Liu Ming, intent on honing his melee skills, gathered his telekinetic energy, preparing to rely solely on his melee abilities to resist. The wolf bear lunged at him, but Liu Ming didn't dodge or evade. He extended his right hand, entwining countless blood energy threads. The black and red blood energy threads quickly reorganized, forming a black and red shield nearly a meter in diameter before Liu Ming, largely enveloping him. Boom. The wolf bear attacked with immense force, but it crumbled before the crimson shield. The crimson shield flickered under the wolf bear's direct attack, countless black and red blood threads emerging like the shreds of a shattered pillow, yet the blood energy replenished the shield, maintaining its integrity. The wolf bear struck 3 times before finally blasting the crimson shield apart. The moment the crimson shield shattered and spilled blood, Liu Ming extended the 5 fingers of his blood-red right hand. Rip. He tore off a large chunk of flesh from the wolf bear's ferocious head, leaving it drenched in blood and an unnaturally hideous sight. The excruciating pain caused the wolf bear to roar in agony and frenzy. Liu Ming succeeded in his strike and quickly retreated, casually throwing aside the nearly 10 pounds of flesh torn from the wolf bear's cheek. His right hand once again transformed into a crimson shield to block his vitals, while his left hand clenched into a fist, deadly crimson curling around his fingertips. He was ready to strike the wolf bear a few more times when it was caught off guard. This time, Liu Ming didn't even intend to use his ultimate sword. Normally, neither his previous career as a beast tamer nor his current career as a dragon keeper would have provided much physical benefit. However, Liu Ming, now mere A-rank peak dragon keeper, possessed the strength of a second-rank professional, making it difficult for him to fully utilize this strength. It was like a mage suddenly possessing the brute force of a knight, surpassing his level, but only skilled in ranged spell casting. Naturally, he couldn't adapt to the demands of wielding a sword and mounting a horse to strike. He needed to fully adapt to this surge in strength through repeated battles that strained his body's potential. Once on all fours, the wolf bear's speed surged even further, at least 30% to 40% faster than when standing upright, while its agility also improved slightly. If standing upright resembled a human crawling on all fours, then this wolf bear on all fours was the most perfect state, the one most in tune with biological behavior and the full potential of its structure. Each bear paw, larger than a palm leaf fan, struck like a small yield bomb. Even Liu Ming, with his impressive dodging abilities, struggled to avoid the equally accelerated wolf bear's paws. Constantly struck by the wolf bear's paws, his crimson shield unable to fully block them, Liu Ming remained utterly bruised and battered, yet he never tired of the experience. Liu Ming knew that, despite his apparent discomfiture in this ever-present predicament, each time he pushed his muscles to the limit, his skills and melee abilities began to grow. Liu Ming's physique and strength rivaled those of a tier 2 F rank warrior, a pure power warrior focused on defense. While his agility and speed were slightly slower, his reaction speed surpassed them. Reaction speed, after all, is linked to neurons, and Liu Ming's application of mental power to these neurons had reached a truly masterful level. Even a tier 2 C rank warrior wouldn't dare stand up to a head-on battle of strength against a furious wolf bear, let alone Liu Ming. However, Liu Ming sought to do the opposite, to unleash his own potential. He sensed that the heart of the volcanic furnace still held immense combat potential waiting to be tapped. His heartbeat, actively mobilized, began to rapidly beat, and the heart began to pump out a fiery strange energy that coursed through the hidden corners of Liu Ming's body. With this influx of fiery energy, Liu Ming's physical strength, already expended in his repeated attacks against the wolf bear, was instantly replenished. With each blow, he felt a vague sense of sustained strength growing stronger and stronger. A layer of almost transparent red flame began to burn on the tip of his fist, in his palm, and even on his crimson shield. With the influx of fiery energy, Liu Ming's power soared to new heights. Second order F level, second order E level, second order D level. When Liu Ming felt that the power of the volcanic furnace had reached its limit, his strength soared from second order F level to second order D level. While still no match for the wolf bear head-on, the gap between them had narrowed considerably. Combined with the nearly endless supply of energy provided by the volcanic furnace, Liu Ming had reason to believe he could hold his own against the clumsy bear. It all came down to who could outlast the other, who would fall first under the other's fists. The wolf bear collided with Liu Ming again. Liu Ming was knocked back 8 or 9 steps, while the wolf bear retreated only a small one. However, the wolf bear suffered far greater recoil than Liu Ming's, as the scarlet shield in Liu Ming's hand nearly neutralized the attack's impact. The crimson veins of the scarlet shield acted like the strongest shock-absorbing material. Every powerful attack from the monster, unless it shattered the shield outright, ultimately reduced the impact to a near imperceptible level. Each scarlet shield could withstand 3 or 4 full strength attacks from the wolf bear. If it was merely grazed by its claws, it could withstand even longer and more attacks. As the scarlet shield shattered one after another, the despicable human, before it remained unscathed, and the wolf bear finally realized something was amiss. Its physical strength had dropped to a low point, and each attack became unstable due to the weakening of its physical strength. However, the human in front of it seemed as if its physical strength had not been consumed at all, and the defensive power of each attack remained very stable. Chapter 277, Brute Force Resist, Show Mercy, Part 2. Seeing the wolf bear's attacks weakening, Liu Ming suddenly unleashed his might without warning, giving his opponent no chance to react. He knew the perfect time to confront the wolf bear had arrived. Although Liu Ming's flame dragon wing cloak hadn't yet unfurled its massive flaming wings, the blast of air created by the blazing flames within it significantly increased his speed. The glider boots on his feet were also flapping their tiny wings furiously. As he charged towards the wolf bear, Liu Ming's hands gradually enveloped in dust, slowly transforming from flesh and blood into a rocky right arm. Xitagaba's secret technique, collapse. Liu Ming still didn't utilize his telekinesis, instead incorporating Xitagaba's secret techniques into every move, punch, and kick. The rocky right arm crashed into the wolf bear, which roared frantically, and intercepted Liu Ming's conjured rock arm with its massive paws. However, Liu Ming remained expressionless. He simply exerted force a second time. With the added force of this second burst, his right fist finally unleashed the effect of the collapse secret technique. The wolf bear withstood the blow head-on. The loud thud was Liu Ming's fist impacting the wolf bear's paw, and then a thick yellow ripple spread across the tip of his fist, like ripples on the surface of water. The flesh on the paw trembled and undulated like waves on a massive wave. Roar. After taking Liu Ming's punch, which incorporated the profound art of collapse, the wolf bear roared in agony. Its face contorted in the intense pain, as if its internal organs were being displaced by the blow. The wolf bear decisively abandoned its attack on Liu Ming, and quickly dropped to all fours, daring to retreat, not daring to confront him. Liu Ming, knowing no bounds, dodged forward, catching up to the severely injured wolf bear, who had been struck by his full strength punch, and unleashed a barrage of punches. Yellow sand filled the air, and the wind blew. Under the relentless barrage of blows, the wolf bear's features bled and wailed in agony, looking utterly miserable. The wolf bear could no longer resist. Despite its thick skin and flesh, it was practically vomiting blood from the blow. The essence of the collapse technique was to bypass defenses and directly damage its internal organs, a skill the wolf bear could not defend against. Its sturdy limbs moved frantically, desperate to escape this place as quickly as possible, to escape this perverted human who seemed determined to crush it with every punch. The team from the Wuling safe zone had just arrived at the center of the town. As they passed the main road where Liu Ming and the wolf bear were fighting, they advanced cautiously and stealthily. Upon witnessing the fierce battle before them, the 8 or 9 members of the group were stunned, frozen in place. Is this the great god? The only woman in the team, the first to regain consciousness, asked with a glint in her eyes, a hint of disbelief. A level 2nd monster, a wolf bear of the highest power level. Even as a monster that evolved during the cosmic catastrophe, its innate combat talent and abilities were inferior to those of the invading aliens. But this couldn't conceal the fact that it was a formidable monster with comprehensive strength reaching the level of a level 2nd monster. In the safe zone, the term level 2 was reserved for a few titans. Every time a level 2 monster attacked the safe zone, it threw hundreds of thousands of people into chaos, everyone on edge, and the level 2 evolvers racked their brains to resolve the situation. And now, they were witnessing a mysterious man up close and personal, chasing a level 2 monster they had revered as a tiger or leopard, and who had just given up on entering the town out of fear, like a chicken or a dog. This guy's strength is definitely at the level of a titan, and he's not just an ordinary titan. The team leader, the most composed and composed, said solemnly. As the most powerful of the group present, he knew more than his own team members. Naturally, he knew that even the few level 2 titans in the safe zone were not of equal strength. Strong ones, like Colonel Ko Xian Long, who had already aspired to become the strongest evolver in Wuling, were far inferior to him. And the man before them was definitely not the weakest. I just don't know if this person is from another safe zone or from the free forces down there. Another middle-aged man in the team, who looked older, said with some concern. Everyone fell silent upon hearing this. Everyone understood what he meant. If this terrifying man came from another safe zone, such as the nearby Huoyuan safe zone, it would be fine. But if he was from the free forces, the situation would be dire. With the establishment of the Wuling East Safe Zone, the military and government authorities were committed to reclaiming and purging Wuling City. Unexpectedly, the greatest resistance during this period wasn't the monsters within the city, but rather their own kind. Those who, upon the establishment of the East Safe Zone, had refused to move with the military, instead used the powerful supernatural powers gained at the altar to gather the survivors and establish their own gathering places. These were separatist organizations, ruling their own territories. They were what people in the safe zone called the Free Forces. Not only did these Free Forces refuse to cooperate with the military and government's purge forces to eliminate the monster threat, they actually obstructed them at every turn. They seemed to fear that once the East Safe Zone was cleared of monsters, they would be subjugated. After all, in a dark age of unlimited individual power, few people would willingly embrace the thrill of being a local tyrant or accept constraints and restrictions. This was why the team feared this individual was a member of the Freedom Forces. If this mysterious expert was a powerful figure from the Freedom Forces, their team, with its distinct Dungan district identity, would likely face a difficult outcome. After all, much of their weapons and equipment were standard equipment independently developed by the military and government. Any professional who had interacted with the evolved professionals in the Dungan district would be familiar with this equipment, making concealment nearly impossible. Perhaps this mysterious expert hadn't noticed them, or perhaps disdained their concealment and pursued the terrifying wolf bear alone. Finally, the team leader's words dispelled everyone's concerns and suspicions. Alright, whatever side he's from, it's none of our business for now. Let's head to the industrial zone, find the equipment, and leave immediately. The group retreated into the shadows, dispersing into the distance. As for Liu Ming, he had already pursued the wolf bear to its lair, one in the center of town, the other in a small zoo. The wolf bear, struck by Liu Ming's repeated blows no fewer than 10 times, was vomiting blood and looked utterly exhausted. However, these injuries weren't fatal to this tough creature. Chased to its lair, the wolf bear refused to enter the zoo's main gates. Instead, it halted its flight and stood at the entrance, confronting Liu Ming. Its cloudy eyes were filled with hatred and determination. Roar. With a roar, the wolf bear, despite its severe injuries, leaped forward and lunged at Liu Ming again. It seemed as if something behind it was worth risking its life to stop Liu Ming. Liu Ming was deeply moved. The surging dust dissipated, and it stopped attacking its already wounded prey. Instead, it sighed softly and spoke to the empty space behind it. Hold him. The massive body of the cannibal blood beast suddenly appeared. With a thud, it knocked the wolf bear to the ground, then pinned it with its massive claws, preventing it from moving. Liu Ming then walked into the zoo. Chapter 278 Demon Hunting Prototype. Change from Ashes. The zoo wasn't large, merely a small one run by a local. This wolf bear, before its evolution, must have been a grizzly or black bear, and was probably the rarest animal in the entire zoo. But at that moment, the zoo was utterly silent, with the remains of various creatures scattered everywhere. Liu Ming, seemingly preoccupied with his goal, headed straight for the deepest reaches of the zoo. Roar, roar. As Liu Ming reached a tattered wooden door deep within the zoo, he heard a series of growls, resembling those of a wolf bear, though remarkably childish. A delighted expression lit up Liu Ming, and he kicked the already shaky door open. Inside, he saw a large rotund haystack. A group of plump, round figures lay on the grass. Among them, the largest and most robust, stared at Liu Ming with fierce eyes, glaring intently, occasionally letting out growls. 1, 2, 3, 8. There are actually 8. They're so fertile. Liu Ming counted the cubs on his fingers, his face filled with ecstasy. He hadn't expected to find 8 wolf bear cubs here. These creatures possessed the potential of at least a 4th level transcendental level, and they were true cubs. He hadn't expected to find 8 at once. These cubs looked no bigger than a giant bear dog, barely reaching his waist when standing upright. Compared to the adult wolf bear, they were definitely cubs. If they were half-grown individuals with more mature consciousness, Liu Ming wouldn't have been so surprised. After all, mature consciousness makes taming difficult. But a cub like this is like a blank slate. It can be trained to whatever you fill it with. These monstrous cubs are the most coveted pets of every beast tamer. But with 8 of them, Liu Ming was stumped as to how to take them away. Finally, his eyes caught sight of a hemp rope nearby. The kind of thick hemp rope used for tug-of-war. He simply tied all 8 cubs to it one by one. Finally, he grasped the hemp rope and dragged the 8 cubs, still dazed and disoriented, lying on their stomachs in the grass nest, out the door like pets. As they exited the zoo, the mother bear let out a howl even more piercing than her own. Boys, all her cubs have been captured by this damned human. She's going crazy. Bang. Seeing its prey still struggling, the cannibal blood beast smashed its claws into the wolf bear's head, instantly bringing its struggle to its senses. Let's go. With the 8 cubs in tow, Liu Ming, satisfied and full of energy, mounted the cannibal blood beast and prepared to leave. But as soon as the cannibal blood beast released the mother bear and prepared to carry its owner away, the wolf bears relentlessly attacked Liu Ming. Even with Liu Ming dragging them, the cub's speed was unimpressive, barely comparable to a husky on a whirlwind. Without resolving the mother bear's attack, there was no way to leave. However, Liu Ming, having just stolen all the children, felt too embarrassed to resort to a brutal killing spree. Instead, he threatened fiercely, "If you dare chase me again, I'll slaughter all your children, one by one." He then grabbed a bear cub, his blood-red fingers gripping its delicate head as he glared fiercely at the mother wolf bear. The wolf bear glared at Liu Ming with scorching hatred, then glanced deeply at the 8 cubs. After scanning each one, a single tear of light lingered in its eyes. It dragged its severely wounded body and limped away. Liu Ming set down the bear cub, which had been terrified but unharmed, and with a smile on his face, a strange emotion crossed his face. He led the 8 cubs, still running after the cannibal blood beast, at a snail's pace towards Wuling. Just as they left town, Liu Ming spotted several off-road vehicles with white Wuling military plates at the town entrance, and stopped the blood beast. Looking at the SUV that had clearly just pulled up, he briefly recalled that during his earlier battle with the wolf bear, a few small insects had indeed been hiding nearby. He sensed they weren't strong enough to pose any threat, and, focused on chasing the fleeing wolf bear, he ignored them. I think I hold the rank of lieutenant colonel from the Wuling military, Liu Ming said with a strange smile. After a moment's thought, he led the blue hook blood beast in the direction of the creatures. The mother of the 8 wolf bear cubs was currently in a state of rampage, and if they weren't careful, they could be wiped out by the unfortunate creatures they were using as a vent for their anger. He truly needed to understand the current situation in Wuling, at least to determine whether his legacy was still intact. If their descriptions satisfied him, then defeating them would be a simple matter. As the blue hook blood beast tracked the scent of the SUVs to its target, it spotted the wolf bears roaming nearby. It seemed the mother bear, freshly grieving the loss of her cubs, had already fixed her eyes on these unfortunate individuals with hatred. Seeing her enemy return, carrying her cubs with her, she threatened to attack again. But after Liu Ming once again grabbed one of her cubs and repeated his tactics, she could only watch him leave with hatred. Master. The 2 members of the team who had worked together to move the first piece of equipment also spotted Liu Ming at the factory in trance. Are you from the Wuling East safe zone? Liu Ming asked. They were stunned by the question, seemingly unsure why this mysterious master would ask them such a question. Remembering they were still unsure whether he belonged to the Free Forces, they hesitated to admit they were members of the opposing safe zone. Yes, we are all from the East safe zone. I wonder what brings this master to visit so suddenly? Just as they were in a dilemma, their captain arrived. Eventually, Liu Ming successfully extracted the information he was looking for from the group. These individuals were a team hired by the military and government to search for special supplies, the prototype of the future demon hunter teams. From their accounts, Liu Ming learned that the legacy he had left behind had not vanished, but had actually grown over the past 6 months. It had grown into a small fortress housing tens of thousands of survivors. After repeated confirmation, he was convinced that the current Ash Castle, located at the former train station, was the gathering place established by his remaining team. However, Liu Ming's expression did not radiate joy upon hearing this news. Instead, it was clouded with gloom and a hint of murderous intent. According to the group, Ash Castle was now under siege from all sides. Several smaller forts throughout Wuling West City, led by Lu Zuan, the Sandstorm Swordmaster with whom he had a deep grudge, had united to launch a military operation against Ash Castle. Outnumbered, with his strongest force absent, the situation facing Ash Castle was imminent. Chapter 279, Battle of the Iron Guard, Steel Hearts Bathed in Blood, Part 1. News of the Ash Castle being attacked by multiple survivors sent a wave of anxiety through Liu Ming's heart. Familiar faces surfaced in his mind, yet he feared he would never see them again. He longed to return and unleash a slaughter. However, the 8 encumbered wolf bear cubs made it impossible for Liu Ming to reach full speed. After careful consideration, Liu Ming handed the ropes he held to the captain of the Eastern Safe Zone mercenary team and instructed, "I'm leaving all my pets in your care for now. I will personally retrieve them from the Eastern Safe Zone later. If even one is missing, I will hunt you down, unless you flee Wuling. Understand?" The mercenary team captain nodded solemnly, his expression grim. "Master, I swear to return them intact, or I will be struck by lightning and pierced by thousands of arrows." Liu Ming gave a non-committal nod. After completing his instructions, he turned and left, driving the Kangal blood beast towards Wuling City at lightning speed. As Liu Ming left, a sharp-eyed member of the team looked at the 8 bear cubs with an uneasy expression and asked, "Captain, do you notice that these 8 cubs resemble the same thing?" "What?" someone asked, puzzled. Each of the 8 cubs looked plump and round, a stark contrast to the sturdy appearance of a full-grown wolf bear. However, someone with a keen eye immediately guessed the answer. "Are you blind? They look like miniature versions of the wolf bear, the town's overlord." Upon hearing this, everyone's faces dropped. They abandoned their equipment and instruments, and, led by their captain, didn't dare return, fleeing the town in a different direction. Fear gripped their hearts as they fled. That great deity was truly terrifying. Not only had it beaten the wolf bear into a chase, but it had also stolen an entire litter of cubs. The thought of the mercenary team leader holding the cubs of the town's most terrifying monster in his grasp made a sweat break out on his forehead. If they don't run away now, are they going to wait for the monster that can easily kill their team in seconds to get there after hearing the news? They took a long detour from the outside of the town, and it took them 3 times as long to get to where the car was parked. At this moment, a member of the team seemed to have thought of something, and his face suddenly became gloomy and a little absent-minded. It was not until the team leader asked him the reason with concern that he spoke with difficulty, his voice hoarse. "Boss, everyone should know that I'm an old man who followed the transfer force to the first batch of people to arrive in the safe zone when it was first established." Everyone nodded in agreement. He was indeed one of the first survivors to arrive in the safe zone. He went on, "Everyone knows that during the Great Transfer, a mysterious strong man made indelible contributions in assisting the military and political parties in the transfer. Because of his great contributions, he was directly awarded the rank of lieutenant colonel by the military and political parties from an ordinary civilian." "What do you mean?" "Yes, he is the lieutenant colonel. Absolutely. I have seen him with my own eyes, but his temperament is now more sharp and indifferent than before, and his appearance is more unkempt, so I was not sure. Now, I can be sure. There have been rumors in the safe zone that the lieutenant colonel is from the Fort of Ashes." Someone questioned, "Are you sure? Isn't there a rumor that the lieutenant colonel has died in battle? He hasn't appeared for more than half a year. Haven't you heard that the founder of the Fort of Ashes is also missing?" When he heard the news about the Fort of Ashes, his expression, which had been calm from beginning to end, showed a slight fluctuation. "This is the most powerful evidence. He is definitely not dead. He is back." In the seemingly desolate city, Guang Cheng was leading a team of his subordinates hiding in an alley diagonally opposite the main gate of a villa area. This villa complex had clearly been renovated. The reinforced concrete walls, originally only 2 or 3 meters high, had clearly been reinforced several times, now reaching 3 or 4 meters high, and covered in caltrops and barbed wire. The various sentries, both visible and covert, were meticulously deployed, demonstrating a formidable defense. Despite his mission to attack this complex, a veritable steel fortress, Guang Cheng felt no signs of nervousness. He knew that 12 other teams, like his own, were lurking in the shadows near the villa complex. The attack was to launch simultaneously upon receiving the order, dispersing the defensive firepower. He was only dealing with less than 1/10 of the defenses, so he felt no significant pressure. Furthermore, the leader of this assault was Boss Fang, second only to the leader of the entire Ash Fortress in strength. They had an almost fanatical trust in Boss Fang, as if as long as Boss Fang led the charge, there was no position they couldn't capture. This was despite Guang Cheng not being the longest serving member of the Ash Fortress, nor the most experienced. However, due to his exceptional combat talent, he was quickly promoted and successfully evolved into a knight. Later, due to his extraordinary willpower, he was recognized by Steelhood Knight Fangen, who personally promoted him to captain of the Steelhood Guard. He was also one of the 3 largest and most powerful Steelhood Guard squads. Guang Cheng was very satisfied with his current life, even more so than in peacetime. Although he wasn't born with a rebellious nature, the status, power, dignity, and sense of honor he had gained in this apocalyptic new world far surpassed those of peacetime. In peacetime, he was just a poor athlete who could only afford college with student loans, and a miserable young man who had been job hunting for 2.5 months during graduation season, and was still unemployed. In the apocalypse, he had become a true transcendent, surpassing all mortals. He held a high status, and was admired by all. His strength as an S-class peak, evolved professional ranked him among the top 30 in the entire Ash Castle, making him a well-deserved right-hand man under Boss Fang. If it weren't for the near-daily slaughter and battles, he might even have felt the end of the world was a different kind of paradise bestowed upon him by God. Licking his lips, Guang Cheng gently stroked the blade of his divine grace blade. His eyes, like those of a hawk or vulture hunting, fixed their gaze on a hidden sentry at the gate of the villa complex, whose presence he had spotted, but wholly unaware of having exposed. He only needed to wait for Boss Fang's command to attack, then he would lead his 20 or so men to eliminate the individual within that sentry post. The rules of Ash Castle were clear, and the oversight was rigorous to the point of inflexibility. In Fangen's eyes, these individuals were nothing more than a collection of heads to record their military exploits. His blade was thirsty for fire. Whoosh! Two sharp arrows shot high into the air, piercing the air with a sharp, piercing sound. The sentries, both visible and hidden, scattered throughout the villa complex, had no time to comprehend what had happened. A stream of sturdy, imposing figures emerged from hidden locations throughout the complex, converging in a single direction. Enemy, attack. Several soldiers stationed at a secret outpost near the main gate barely managed to utter a single cry of alarm before being slain by arrows fired from the alley across the way. Their final words were, "Skinny monkey, Zhang Tiden, you guys are such cunning bastards. This is my military achievement. Bah, if you've taken it, then take it. Follow me. Remember to finish off those still alive. The military achievement awaits us." Liu Ming, the strongest soldier at the outpost, watched as a sturdy figure, accompanied by over 20 others, filed past his lifeless body. Each of these men, filled with murderous intent, would have been considered the backbone of his own side. Even the weakest seemed no match for him. He knew things were dire. Letting this elite force charge into headquarters was a surefire recipe for disaster. But he was powerless to change the situation. He was about to die. This one's still alive. I'll give you a hand." A voice rang out in Liu Ming's ears, followed by a sound like a watermelon being stomped on. His head was crushed into a pile of red and white by a strong warrior passing by. Chapter 280, Battle of the Iron Guard, Steelheart bathed in blood, Part 2. 13 murderous streams of people finally converged on the eastern side of the villa complex. At the head of the vast black mass stood a figure clad in gleaming silver armor, a small yet remarkably tall figure. 200 or 300 people gazed at his back, their faces filled with fervor. Though everyone had arrived here drenched in blood and blood, the mere sight of that figure at the forefront seemed to ignite an endless stream of fighting spirit. "My brothers, the other 12 Iron Guard captains and the 2 deputy chiefs have already launched operations against various factions. I believe you all know our mission, so there's no need to elaborate. Now, we simply need to fight our way to the Sandstorm Society's core area and destroy their stronghold. After our triumphant return, I will personally celebrate your victory." The figure's voice wasn't commanding, but it held an indescribable calm. It was like a general, unfazed despite battling blood alone amidst a vast army. "Follow me and slaughter," he concluded. "Kill, kill, kill." The cries of killing echoed behind them, weapons raised, murderous intent rising to the sky. Countless streams of people began pouring out from the various intersections of the villa complex, their number several, even 10 times greater than the 200 or 300 men. But they remained undaunted. Instead, led by the silver-armored figure, they launched a preemptive charge. Blood gradually stained the bright silver armor red. Countless swords and knives slashed at it, but the figure, like a demon, tore through the crowd, unstoppable wherever he passed. Each time he launched his silver short spear from his palm, it ripped into the crowd like a cannonball, piercing countless screams as it passed, even shattering them into a hail of shredded flesh. The scene was horrifying. Yet, the silver-armored figure remained impassive, continuing his merciless slaughter. It wasn't that he lacked compassion, but to show mercy to his enemies would be cruel to his brothers, who trusted him so deeply. Therefore, he had to, and could only, harden his heart. This was war, a fight to the death. And it was these guys who initiated the war. Today was destined to be a day of bloodshed. Fierce fighting raged across Wuling West City. 15 strongholds, led by the Sandstorm Society, were particularly under indiscriminate attack by the Ash Castle Iron Guard and key personnel. Standing in front of a 3-star hotel in a once prosperous neighborhood, Jin Sideo gazed at the hotel with a strange expression. He said to his subordinates, "Over a year ago, I was a chef at this hotel. I never imagined they'd bring their men to attack us today." He roared with laughter. "Kill. Spare not a single one of these Sandstorm Society bastards." His laughter was thick with murderous intent. Meanwhile, a Sandstorm Society stronghold in a shopping mall was also under attack from a squad, led by Luo Yingren. Ash Castle's desperate counter-attack was unfolding in every corner. Even as Ash Castle's elite forces were deployed, Sandstorm Society President Liu Zuan and Hurricane Fort's Zhuo Heng had assembled their combined forces and were marching towards the former train station, the home of Ash Castle. This was a massive force, numbering over 6,000. It would have been no easy feat for the military and government to gather so many fighters at once. Furthermore, among them were 5 or 6 level 2 evolved classes, while Ashford only had Gongweeksin and Fangen. If this force engaged in a fierce battle in Ashford's limited manpower would have been nearly impossible to resist. As the team advanced smoothly towards Ashford, not even the Ashford sentries or scouts were detected. Gradually, the team's leaders began to notice something fishy going on. Are they trying to push us to their headquarters and confront us with defensive measures? Even if they wanted to rely on defense, there's no reason they wouldn't have any obstacles along the way. This isn't the style of the Marjun. Aren't they always trying to wear us down? Just as the leaders began to speculate on the reason for this strange situation, their base, under the onslaught of Ashford's elite forces, finally broke down and began to send out reinforcement in an attempt to recover their main force. The first to arrive, naturally, to call for help, were the Sandstorm Society, who had been attacked from all sides. Leader, it's over. Fangen and his men have already stormed into headquarters. Almost as soon as he'd finished his words, the man seeking help, severely wounded and bleeding profusely, collapsed from shock while continuing his march. Ruzan and the Sandstorm Society's senior leaders' expressions changed drastically. Ruzan's veins throbbed with rage. Speed up the march. They're diverting our defenses and courting death. Let's just destroy Ashford. Upon hearing Ruzan's words, the leaders of the other major factions exchanged bewilderment, neither agreeing nor refusing, remaining silent. Upon learning of the attack on Sandstorm Society's headquarters, Sanford, they felt a pang of fear and suspicion, and were reluctant to continue their advance towards Ashford in the face of uncertainty. As expected, before the team had even advanced a kilometer, the remaining members of the other major factions arrived one after another, calling for help. Shock and bewilderment filled the faces of all the factions whose headquarters had been attacked. Where did Marjan and Gongweeksin's group find reinforcement? They were actually strong enough to directly attack the 9 factions' headquarters. However, they had never anticipated that, aside from the devastating attack on the Sandstorm faction, the other 8 factions had only suffered minor, harassing attacks. Their hasty arrival for assistance was merely a bluff, and the reality of the Sandstorm faction's heavy losses convinced the other side that they were truly on the offensive. President Liu, I'll be leaving. Farewell. The leader of a small fort was the first to depart with his troops. His was the weakest of the 9 factions, and if the plan succeeded, he wouldn't receive much in the way of benefits. The prospect of causing trouble wouldn't be worth it. So, upon hearing of the attack on his base, he quickly withdrew. Following the vanguard, 5 more small forts withdrew. Ultimately, only Liu Zuan, who had a deep grudge against Liu Ming, Zhuo Heng of Hurricane faction, who had long coveted the 4-color altar, and the members of the Chengmao Iron Fist Society, Ashfort's old neighbor, remained. The 3 factions could only curse inwardly at the sight of most of their men already gone, but they remained steadfast in their initial plan to jointly attack Ash Castle and seize the 4-color altar, and continued their advance towards Ash Castle. By this time, Ash Castle was fully occupied by not only the 39 guards, but also elite troops like the Jinsi Dao and Luo Yingren. Even Marjan and Gongweeksin, along with other key combatants, had personally taken to the battlefield. The remaining personnel, aside from the several hundred combatants led by Kinyu and the garrison reserves, were limited to Gongruahan, an already weak auxiliary evolutionary class, the 3-headed dragon pet, and a large number of giant cats and snake-like monsters commanded by the dragon pets. Chapter 281, Enemy at the Gate, Crossbows and Arrows. It was 6 PM, dusk in Hurricane Fort. The setting sun stained the outer walls of Hurricane Fort a blood red, casting a shadow over the crimson glow, making the entire world seem ablaze with red. But at this moment, in front of Hurricane Fort's gate, there was more than just red light. There were also piles of corpses and puddles of blood. Besides the Sandstorm Society's headquarters, Hurricane Fort was also a key target. In the military operation against Ash Fort, Hurricane Fort's leader, Zeduo Heng, was the undisputed second in command after Uzun, and he played a crucial role in the formation of the joint military operation. Originally, Ash Fort and Hurricane Fort had no hostile relationship at all, but the news of Ash Fort's four-color altar spread, turning the two into sworn enemies. Through the intentional or unintentional propaganda of the administrators, almost everyone in Ash Fort knew that the owner of Hurricane Fort would not give up his greed and desire for Ash Fort, or rather, the four-color altar within Ash Fort, unless he obtained the four-color altar, or was completely crippled or killed. It's almost time to return. After a bloody battle, he personally slew the remaining Hurricane Fort commander, a top-ranking SSS rank commander. Ma Jun, similarly struck by the blade, dragged his right arm, his body bruised to the bone, before everyone. He immediately ordered a retreat. His mission was to give the second in command, who remained at Hurricane Fort, the illusion of a well-prepared attack, thereby prompting Hurricane Fort to withdraw its troops and reinforce. However, due to the second in command's weakness, he proactively attacked the enemy, and was killed by Ma Jun in the fight. Without the temporary commander's control, Hurricane Fort's defenders fell into disarray. Ma Jun even considered that, if he launched a full-scale assault on Ash Castle, regardless of the casualties, it wouldn't be a stretch to capture the entire Hurricane Fort. However, even capturing the entire Hurricane Fort would not improve the situation at this point. Intelligence and information from all sources confirmed that 9 small forts participated in the military operation against Ash Castle. With only the 200 or 300 steelhead guards, 12 other guards, and a handful of elite troops to counter the Sandstorm Society, Ash Castle's strength pales in comparison. It simply couldn't sustain a full-scale assault on the remaining small forts. The mere 100 or so men he brought with him were more of a feint than an attack on Hurricane Castle. This well-placed smoker screen immediately deceived the remaining Hurricane Castle garrison into believing the enemy had more than just a limited force, that they had concealed most of the danger and even managed to recruit allies to mitigate the crisis. In reality, the Ma army consisted of only a handful of men. Just as the remaining Hurricane Castle garrison had urgently completed its pre-war mobilization following the death of its commander-in-chief, and as everyone watched the Ma army await the enemy with full alert, the Ma army suddenly, and without warning, led all its members in a hasty retreat. Hundreds of men turned away, leaving behind only their silhouettes against the setting sun and a trail of blood stained by the crimson glow. Gong Weeksin, who had also led nearly 100 men to attack the Chengmao Iron Fist Society headquarters, also withdrew shortly after the cavalry retreated. Meanwhile, Sandstorm's Wardmaster Lu Zuan's forces were overly bloated, and the leaders of the 9 smaller forts were divided, resulting in slow progress. Furthermore, each faction could only be mobilized by its own high-ranking officials, and even someone like Liu Ming, who was only on short-term lease, was unable to do so. At this point, the leaders of the remaining smaller forts, each with their own agenda, withdrew and returned to their presumed bases. The remaining 3 organizations in the joint military operation each had a single target, resulting in greater cohesion and greater ease of mobilization than the previous 9-fort coordination. This would likely allow the 3 forces to advance at a speed far exceeding their previous snail's pace. The Ash Castle is within reach. Everyone, speed up. Draw your swords, string your arrows, and prepare to charge. Lu Zuan announced, as soon as his outline became visible. The entire Wuling XC zone wasn't very large. If there weren't any monsters running all the way around, it wouldn't take an hour or so, perhaps even dozens of minutes. After a rapid march, the combined forces finally reached the walls of Ash Castle. 5 or 6 meters high, shimmering orange, they shone like orange crystal in the sunlight. Swish, swish, swish. As they reached the wall, a burst of rapid air-piercing sounds echoed. The clacking of sharp weapons piercing flesh echoed relentlessly through the throng of people. The massive crossbows perched on the walls of Ash Castle unleashed their bolts at the uninvited guests brought by Ruzan. Each bolt required at least 2 strong men to draw and charge, delivering immense range and immense power. Each bolt, if it didn't miss, or was intercepted by a powerful evolver like Ruzan, could penetrate 3 or 4 enemies before stalling due to its kinetic energy. There were 12 such powerful crossbows in total. As more and more fell, the expressions of Lu Xun and the other two leaders grew increasingly grim. All those ranged classes with a strike radius exceeding 500 meters, come to my side and take position. We must attack those 12 powerful crossbows immediately. Archers, marksmen, elementalists, mages, and other ranged classes all gathered around Lu Xun, Zhuo Heng, and the other two. These three were the only second level evolvers present, and in this arrow-soaked environment, staying close by them was undoubtedly safer. Follow us closely, and launch a ranged attack, to destroy those 12 powerful crossbows. Don't worry about the danger, we'll block all incoming arrows. Lu Xun roared, leading a charge towards the city wall. The powerful crossbows on the Wall of Ashes were actually all based on a design for long-range weapons obtained from the Four-Color Altar, renowned for their extreme range and immense power. However, their incredibly slow firing rate, their bulk, more than a man's length, and weighing hundreds of kilograms, ultimately reduced them to defensive weapons. However, its terrifying effective range, exceeding 1,000 meters, made it difficult to close in. Otherwise, with the speed of Lu Xun and his men, they could reach the enemy in a flash and destroy every crossbow. However, with an effective strike radius exceeding 1,000 meters, each arrow fired from a fully drawn bowstring possessed such powerful kinetic energy and penetrating power that it could pierce 50 centimeters of homogeneous steel. Even a second level evolver like Lu Xun was reluctant to withstand such repeated attacks. However, destroying the crossbows now required close proximity to the city wall. They had no choice but to resist. Lu Xun led the charge, erecting an incredibly thick sandstone tower shield to shield the dozen or so men behind him, and rapidly advanced towards the wall. Zhuo Heng, braving the wind wall that deflected the incoming crossbow arrows, also led the dozen or so men behind him towards the wall. The two leaders of the Chengmao Iron Fist Society, Yang Wan, later known as Tiger Absolute, and his deputy, the second in command of the Chengmao Iron Fist Society, the fierce god Chen Humin, one holding a giant shield and the other emitting a primordial energy shield, worked together to block the incoming arrows and steadily advance towards the city wall. The plot has reached a turning point, and the wind and sand have caused some trouble, so there will only be one update today. I hope you can forgive me, brothers. Chapter 282, Defense Line Collapse, 3-layer defense. Standing atop the ash wall, Qin Yu, in charge of defense, watched as the coalition forces, their advance slowed by 12 powerful crossbows, split into 3 waves. The vanguard, bearing powerful crossbows, rapidly approached the wall. With a solemn expression, he ordered, all defenders, abandon the outer wall, destroy the crossbows, and retreat to the second central wall. He was well aware of the power of the defensive crossbows his men commanded. Even the armor of main battle tank would struggle to withstand their continuous fire. To be able to lead his men so effortless against the advancing enemy forces must be an evolved class above the second level. With their primary combat power and elite troops deployed, the remaining defenders of Ash Castle were simply no match for the onslaught of the enemy. Qin Yu's only option was to stall for time, hoping that the elite troops who had gone out to attack would return quickly to reinforce him, and that he and his few hundred defenders could hold out until then. The survivors within the first outer wall had already moved to the central area, previously inhabited only by Ash Castle's core members, the day before the coalition's attack. The entire Ash Castle had been hastily converted into a war fortress, with the outer, middle, and inner walls forming the 3 primary lines of defense. The first line, housing 12 heavy crossbows, was merely the weakest of the 3. Why have all the arrows stopped? The 3 leaders leading the charge wondered as they felt the heavy crossbow fire from the walls gradually dwindle and eventually disappear. The ranged specialists they had painstakingly brought in were now useless, as the defenders seemed to have retreated, leaving even the powerful crossbows unattended. Had they ordered their men to attack the air? However, their pace remained undiminished, and they soon reached the base of the wall. At 5 or 6 meters, the ash wall wasn't particularly high. The evolvers only needed a single relay point to roll over it. However, every brick of the Wall of Ashes had been crafted using the unique professional abilities of Gong Ruohan, the fiery barrier craftsman. Anyone clinging to the outer wall would be attacked by blazing flames. While the damage dealt by these fire-attributed attacks was minimal, they were a calamity for anyone attempting to scale the Wall of Ashes. 9 out of 10 evolved classes attempting to scale the wall were defeated by this strange, albeit not particularly tall, wall. Ultimately, Lu Xun had to turn his attention to the imprisoning steel wall. This steel gate also benefited from Gong Ruohan's work. Ordinary steel had been blended with other metals, and through Gong Ruohan's craftsmanship, the steel had been resmelted, reaching a level capable of withstanding artillery shells and impenetrable to ordinary swords. Lu Xun, already utterly impatient, fired a barrage of punches from 100 meters outside the Wall of Ashes gate. Several hammers, like thundering hammers, hurled themselves at the steel gate, swelling a cloud of yellow sand. Boom boom boom. Amidst resounding explosions, cracks appeared on the steel gate, particularly at the joints holding it in place. The flame crystal rock itself began to crack. Bang. Without waiting for his leader's orders, one of Ruohan's professionals led his men towards the gate. The gate, already teetering on the brink of collapse from Ruohan's sandstorm fist, collapsed with a resounding roar. The soldiers from the 3 coalition forces rushed into the crumbling gate like thieves at a newly uncovered treasure trove. They had long been tasked with a reward for the first person to discover the 4-color altar, a bounty that would drive even ordinary evolvers mad. They began a frantic search for the legendary altar. However, as thousands filed into the outer walls of Ash Castle, they discovered a deserted city, or rather, a city devoid of any supplies, let alone an altar. Over 3,000 people poured into the outer walls of Ash Castle, yet the area remained largely unpopulated. Soon after, the scattered allied forces that had poured into the outer city began to hear intermittent screams. It was Sumi, lurking in the shadows, leading his elusive giant cats to secretly hunt down the allied forces that had breached the outer walls. Damn it. 30 or 40 of my best men have already perished in confusion. In response to the sporadic casualties, Hu Yang, the leader of the Chengmeo Iron Fist Society, roared angrily during a hastily convened wartime meeting between the 3 leaders. Their Iron Fist Society was the weakest of the 3, with fewer troops than the other 2 factions. This put them at a disadvantage in the future division of profits, and this attack primarily targeted their own men. Perhaps the combined number of assassinations within the outer city from Hurricane Castle and Sandstorm would equal the number of casualties from their own side. Lu Xun and Zeduo Heng also looked unhappy. Zeduo Heng cursed furiously. I've heard for a long time that the mysterious leader of Ash Castle is actually a beast tamer, commanding several formidable beasts. The 3 of them observed the victims, revealing that the fatal wounds were all inflicted by the minions of the evolved beasts. This beast is elusive and difficult to capture. Rather than letting it continually drain our manpower in the shadows, we should gather all our forces and charge in. Forget about finding any supplies. I'm afraid any useful supplies have been diverted and destroyed by the scum of Ash Castle. Order everyone to close in on us and immediately breach their second line of defense. Ash Castle has 3 walls. I wonder how long these scum can hold out. Finally, Lu Xun gave the final order. Before anyone could even process the bodies of the hundreds killed by Sumi and his giant cats, everyone began to gather towards the central defensive wall. King Yu, having already deployed his second line of defense after a series of assassinations by Sumi, had already completed his second line of defense. The sight of the second line of defense made the pupils of Lu Xun and the other 2, watching from afar, shrink. They saw a full 24 heavy crossbows deployed along the second line, double the number of the first line, and boasting several black barrels resembling tank main guns. Seeing these barrels, Lu Xun's heart sank. These ferocious barrels looked like they were not to be trifled with. Lu Xun and the other 2 blushed, their lips twitching. It seemed impossible to capture Ash Castle today without suffering a major setback. Breaking through the first line of defense and the recent assassination had cost no fewer than 300 lives. The second line, with its even more formidable defenses, was clearly impossible to penetrate without even more casualties. Unlike the lightning attack on their own base, which had been easily breached, their own base was well known, and few expected Ash Castle to launch an offensive. The forces of Ash Castle had clearly anticipated a joint military operation, and were well prepared. These defenses were unlikely to be erected in a short period of time. Thinking of this, Lu Xun and the others looked even uglier. They had originally thought they had picked up a great bargain, but they had actually picked up a hedgehog, and their hands were covered in blood from its sharp thorns. Chapter 283 The second line of defense, magnetic plasma cannon. A crowd thronged the second line of defense. The coalition forces, now fully assembled, were still 700 or 800 meters from the central wall. The effective strike radius of a heavy crossbow was over 1,000 meters, but this time, Liu Ming, clearly aware of the destructive power of its arrows, had chosen to gather his forces behind a large complex of buildings. Even 24 heavy crossbows, blocked by the wall, would have struggled to deliver an effective attack. Qin Yu, however, remained remarkably composed. Although the flashing swords and scattering blood and flesh were infinitely more brutal than the treacherous business world he had navigated in peacetime, he remained composed and engaged in a cheerful conversation with a middle-aged man of his own age. As they spoke, they pointed at the enemy troops not far away, resembling the demeanor of a great general who, amidst laughter and conversation, had reduced ships and masts to dust. This man was none other than Wang Sucheng, once admired by Liu Ming. Old Wang, thank you so much for your help this time. If it weren't for you, old Qin, and I, facing such a huge situation, I'm afraid we wouldn't be so calm. Qin Yu sighed deeply, and said to the man beside him, Old Qin, if the hair is gone, the skin will fall away. After all, I'm from Ash Castle, so it's my duty. The middle-aged man replied with a faint smile, his tone carrying an indifference that made him feel unapproachable. Old Qin seemed to have a deep understanding of Wang Sucheng's character, and asked nonchalantly, Old Wang, what tricks do you think Liu Ming will use this time? This is just the second line of defense. I believe that the information about our 3 city walls and 3 lines of defense has been conveyed to Liu Ming completely and accurately through those spies. He will definitely hold back his killer move until we reach our last line of defense to fight us to the death. He will most likely still use human lives to fill our second line of defense. The plan of the 2 deputy chiefs seems to be successful. Only 3,000 of their 6,000 coalition forces are left. It seems that a lot of them have left. At least 200 or 300 should have died just now. We have to leave another 600 or 700 of them under this city wall, and finally fight a protracted war with the remaining 2,000 people in front of the last line of defense, waiting for the Iron Guard chiefs and the 2 deputy chiefs to come back for support. Wang Sucheng's analysis was very logical, which made Qin Yu nod repeatedly. There was no longer any anxiety in his expression, and he became more calm. Qin Yu clapped a fat hand on Wang Sucheng's shoulder, his face gleeful. Old Wang, I'm telling you, you're a damned good military advisor. When the deputy chief returns, I'll definitely push you up. You're such a talent. Don't let me down. Don't keep trying to refuse, or I'll get angry. As he spoke, Qin Yu's fat face hardened, and he looked at Wang Sucheng seriously. Wang Sucheng gave a wry smile, shook his head, and stopped expressing his opinion, gazing at the coalition forces in the distance. If it weren't for the imminent disaster facing Ash Castle, he still wouldn't have felt the urge to step forward. He couldn't help but think back to that breezy morning when he first met that young man. Perhaps, if that young man were still around, he could be a full-time military advisor, but with Marjan and the others, he wasn't qualified to assist him. He had been gone for 6 months, and while no one believed he was gone for good, he knew he would return one day. But he knew how slim the hope was of someone who had been gone for 6 months suddenly returning in the apocalypse. Since only with your gift can we have a foothold in this apocalyptic world, then I will guard this apocalyptic pure land for you. As he thought about it, Wang Sucheng's gaze grew firmer, deeper, and more powerful. Here they come. Wang Sucheng was no transcendent. Through his telescope, he saw that the coalition forces in the distance had begun to move. Old Wang, you decide when to launch the attack. Qin Yu, also aware of the enemy's movement, gave Wang Sucheng the authority. 800 meters, 700 meters, 600 meters. It wasn't until the coalition's vanguard approached the second line of defense within 600 meters that the enemy's ranged attackers were within effective attack range. Their ranged weapons and ranged attack energy began to gather, preparing to launch a ranged attack on the second line of defense. Wang Sucheng then uttered a cold and murderous voice. Attack target, enemy ranged attackers, heavy crossbow volley. Swish, swish, swish. 24 heavy crossbows, like roaring beasts, began to attack the enemy. While the second tier professionals were capable of withstanding the heavy crossbows' direct fire, the 12 heavy crossbows wielded by several second tier professionals struggled mightily. This time, there were a full 24. Even if they had the strength to turn back, they were powerless. The first to fall were the coalition's ranged evolved professionals, their hands already gleaming with ranged attack energy. But before they could even manage to fall, something unexpected happened. "Draw your shields," Ruzan shouted. "Draw your shields. Draw your shields." Tall and sturdy defensive professionals roared and began to advance, blocking the ranged professionals, wielding various shields. Even the less powerful shield-bearing defenders were pierced by the heavy crossbow bolts, carrying the defenders behind them and killing them. Even the more powerful evolved professionals, who could even block the heavy crossbow's barrage head-on with 2 or 3 men, were struck by the force of a single arrow, sending them reeling back several steps, as if struck by a sledgehammer. However, they firmly protected the ranged professionals behind them. "Advance. Long-range strikes ready. Fire volleys within 500 meters. Smash those bastards on the walls." Ruzan, a man of brutal origin, smirked, as if he could see the delighted expressions of the Ash Castle bastards watching his own show. "You bastards, you have a plan. I have a ladder. Just wait for death. Once I've climbed the walls, I'll crush the head of the guy in charge of defense. You've killed so many of my troops. Old Wang, this guy's attacking." Fatikin, perched on the wall, watched as shield bearers moved forward to block the heavy crossbows, his smile sly as he looked at Wang Sucheng. Wang Sucheng remained calm. Lightning and electromagnetic cannons, fire volleys. The 6 black barrels, nestled in the wall, flashed blue light as they approached. Light blue arcs flickered within the blue light, and balls of blue plasma energy converged at the barrels' muzzles. Boom. A thunderous roar echoed across the battlefield. From the 6 barrels, 6 balls of plasma energy, swelling with a shimmering blue light, erupted. The blue plasma pierced the crowd directly, striking the shield-bearing warriors head-on. Their faces distorted by the arcing shockwaves, like a chain reaction. Blue light flickered through the crowd. A third of the shield warriors, who had been defending against the heavy crossbows, were instantly struck by the plasma. Even if they survived, they were already incapacitated. Each one of them, convulsed by blue arcs, convulsed, foamed at the mouth, their bodies charred, and collapsed to the ground. "Damn it. Scatter. Scatter. Get out of the way." Seeing half of his highly anticipated shield warriors annihilated in a flash, and the 6 black cannon barrels once again condensing blue plasma, Ruzan, who had just thought he was gaining the upper hand, flew into a rage. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 284, Sandstorm Incoming Ground to Air Assault, Part 1. From the moment he saw the 6 pitch black gun barrels mounted on the wall, each one thicker than a main battle tank's, Liu Zuan had a sense of foreboding. He had never expected this foreboding to strike so suddenly and without warning, and even then, just when he thought the tide was turning, he couldn't care less about the heavy casualties. He was overwhelmed by a raging rage. He felt as if he were about to transform into a devastating sandstorm, ready to rip the wall apart and crush the pesky ants atop it. "Die. Trash." Liu Zuan roared. "I had intended to wait until the final battle. You rubbish. I'm sending you on your way. You're the ones forcing me to do this." Roaring inwardly, Liu Zuan, lifted by an invisible force, broke free from gravity and, without the aid of any vital energy or any other tools, slowly floated into the air. First, grains of sand rose from the ground and surrounded him. Then, more and more gravel began to swirl around Liu Zuan, enveloping him in a vast expanse of dust. The sand spun like a vortex in the sky, drawing more dust into the air. In the blink of an eye, the dust vortex, once barely a man tall, expanded and intensified to 8 or 9 meters high, like a miniature sandstorm, and continued to grow. 500 or 600 meters away, on the wall, Kinyu's composure faded, his face tinged with anxiety. Old Wang, it seems Lu Zuan has lost control and exploded prematurely. We can't let him directly breach the second line of defense. With their current strength, the final line won't hold out for long. Wang Suchen's expression was unusually solemn. I know we need to stop him, but the problem is, we simply don't have the strength to stop him right now, Kinyu said anxiously. Wang Suchen pondered for a moment, then decisively declared, begin activating some of the defensive forces in the third line. Kinyu's face darkened at this. The third line was their final defense against the coalition forces, and its forces were reserved for the final decisive battle. Activating them prematurely now left Kinyu feeling torn and unable to make up his mind. Activate immediately. It's almost too late. Wang Suchen urged Kinyu with a resolute expression. Kinyu glanced at the sandstorm, which had grown from a small puff of dust to nearly 6 stories high, blowing the evolvers around him to the ground, and finally made up his mind. He directed the two young men, a man and a woman, behind him. Chadonja, Zhengfei, immediately summon the two behemoths from the third line of defense and launch a ground-to-air assault. Chadonja and Zhengfei were both apprentice beast tamers who had trained with Liu Ming for a period of time. Liu Ming had captured their first pet, the ice wolf, along with Wu Zhangyan's younger brother, Wu Zhangting. In the 6 months since Liu Ming's departure, the three young men and women have made significant progress. Not only have they become true beast tamers, but their pets are also highly combat capable. They could be considered elite. However, this attack proved too dangerous for those with limited survivability. Furthermore, since Liu Ming's disappearance, only these three young men could effectively communicate with the three dragon pets. Therefore, Deputy Chiefs Ma Jun and Gong Weixin were left behind to assist in the defense. Each of the three young men was assigned to a different dragon pet. Wu Zhangting, who was not present, happened to be Sumi's poop scooper and was currently following behind her, waiting for an opportunity to attack. Zhengfei, the oldest and coldest of the three, has become Fei, the winged claw dragon snake's personal attendant. Anyone else, let alone commanding the dragon or snake, would be killed instantly by the poisonous mist even if they approached. Meanwhile, the only young woman, Chadonja, unexpectedly gained Ji Zedilong's favor, becoming one of the few who could approach him. If it weren't for the three dragon pets that served as his ultimate trump card, Kinyu wouldn't have been as calm as before. The enemy had no fewer than 3 tier 2 professionals and 3,000 combatants. With only 300 or 400 men, even with their preparations, what could they possibly do to stop them? Chadonja and Zhengfei nodded in unison at Kinyu's command, and rushed to the safe area behind the wall. Their respective summoned behemoths were in that direction. The second wall wasn't far from the first wall of ashes, the final line of defense surrounding the former train station square. Both evolvers, C rank and above, moved swiftly and reached their respective targets in a matter of seconds. Chadonja arrived at a massive cratered rock beneath the final line of defense. Stroking the rugged rock with his delicate white hands, he whispered, "Master Jizirong, the enemy has arrived. Lord Kinyu has requested you to repel them." The rock trembled twice, shaking off dust and debris. Then, as if rising from the ground, it suddenly rose, transforming from a mere man-sized rock into a behemoth nearly 3 stories tall. 4 legs, as thick as pillars, supported its massive body. Its dark yellow eyes gazed coldly and mercilessly at the girl before it. Its maw, brimming with fangs and sharp teeth, gaped open, as if about to devour the girl. The unsuspecting onlookers couldn't help but secretly worry for the girl. Fortunately, the beast didn't intend to devour the seemingly delicious meal in one gulp. Instead, it lowered its massive head, grasped the girl in its jaws, and flung her onto its back. Then, with a resounding roar, it began to sink into the earth. Unlike Ji Zedilong, who stood alone, when Zhengfei arrived before the winged claw dragon snake, he faced not only the giant python, but also its subordinates, primarily the evil dragon transformed demonic snakes of the court. These demonic snakes and the winged claw dragon snake were floating in midair, making Zhengfei appear even smaller. He could only tilt his head upwards to see the dragons and snakes. Lord Dragon Snake, Kinyu requests an immediate attack. The battle ahead is urgent. Fei, the winged claw dragon snake, naturally understood Zhengfei's message. With a long cry, he led his demonic snakes towards the second line of defense. Zheng Fei breathed a sigh of relief, seeing that Lord Dragon Snake hadn't given him any trouble this time. He summoned several of his pets and began preparing for the final showdown with the absolute disabled league. Zeddy traveled underground. When he passed the wall of the second line of defense, he emerged from the surface, deposited Chadonja in a safe area within the wall, and then burrowed back underground to attack the coalition forces advancing toward the wall. Chapter 285, Sandstorm Attack, Ground to Air Assault, Part 2. To facilitate a sudden and decisive attack, Zeddy's underground traversal wasn't very deep. However, precisely because of this shallow depth, the ground beneath Zeddy's path was met with intense tremors. Is it an earthquake? A soldier in the coalition forces, extremely sensitive to tremors, suddenly shouted. Holy shit. Is this true? The coalition forces spread word of the sudden tremors, causing a small amount of panic. With a resounding boom, Zeddy's massive body emerged from the ground. Weighing tens of tons, it leaped high the instant it emerged, and as Zeddy descended, a group of unwary individuals were crushed to a pulp. Zeddy attacked directly within the coalition's formation, like a giant beast suddenly appearing amidst the dense mass of men. In just one surprise attack, no fewer than 20 or 30 people were struck. Over half of them were killed or wounded, and the rest struggled to recover. Thanks to Lu Zuan's immediate order to disperse after firing the magnetic plasma cannon, the troops were dispersed. Otherwise, this single attack alone could have inflicted heavy casualties on 40 or 50 men. Seeing a massive beast suddenly appear within the formation, everyone was startled at first, then filled with murderous intent. They temporarily halted their advance and directed their attacks at Zeddy, the uninvited guest. Its black alloy-like scales and powerful torso made it clear to everyone that it was no easy task. If it were allowed to wreak havoc within the formation, who knew how many casualties would result and how devastating the casualties would be, especially aside from Lu Zuan, who was preparing his ultimate move. Zeddy Heng and Yang Wan cast murderous glances at Zeddy. Both were second level evolvers, and among second level professionals, they were genuine combatants, not mere support personnel filling the battlefield. After Liu Ming's disappearance, Zeddy lacked the necessary conditions for evolution. Initially at the leading energy level, he had only reached the peak of SS level after 6 months. He was completely unable to withstand the attacks of a second level evolver. The gap between the first and second levels was far greater than just a few levels. Even though the Zuan Dragon Salamander, a dragon-born creature, possessed combat talents and abilities far superior to ordinary creatures, it was still easily defeated by a second-level evolver. The Zuan Dragon Salamander succeeded in its attack, and seeing the ferocious enemy approaching, it quickly swung its massive limbs and leaped back into a massive pit. While everyone knew this powerful predatory beast emerged from the ground, they seemed to have not anticipated its exceptional ability to burrow and escape. Even Zeddy Heng and Yang Wan, who could have killed Zeddy in 10 seconds, were left empty-handed. Bang! Before Zeddy had escaped the battlefield for more than 5 seconds, the massive figure reappeared. This time, Zeddy's target was the sandstorm, which was steadily gathering strength and power. Zeddy was first flung into the sandstorm's vortex, then, as it broke free, crashed into it again. Bang, 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 bang. The sound of collisions echoed again and again. With each seemingly futile collision, the sandstorm's power seemed to have weakened slightly. Zeddy's impact had clearly weakened the storm, but the others clearly didn't want to witness Zeddy's actions. Zeddy Heng, as if engulfed by a gust of wind, flew swiftly towards Zeddy. Meanwhile, Yang Wan's feet flashed with light, and in a few flashes, he was right next to the massive sandstorm swelling in Lu Zuan's wake. The two men exerted their strength, one wielding a long sword and slashing with hurricane-like sword energy. The other fought barehanded, his fists punctuated by tiger roars, their force even stirring a strong gust of wind. From the gust of wind, a ferocious tiger appeared, pouncing directly at Zeddy, who was still weakening the sandstorm's power with his attacks. If Liu Ming were present at this moment, he would undoubtedly sigh, this being one of the origins of the nickname Tiger Absolute. The combined attack of 2 second-level warriors was enough to inflict injury on Zeddy, not to mention his lack of a second-level evolutionary creature. Even if he had, Jizirang would undoubtedly have been injured if he had resisted. As if oblivious, Jizirang stubbornly charged into the sandstorm once more. Bang! The sandstorm's power diminished slightly. Meanwhile, at the center of the sandstorm, Ruzuan was practically vomiting blood in frustration. He had barely formed his killing move, nearly reaching full form, when a monstrous beast suddenly appeared, abruptly dispersing its power. He was forced to expend a significant amount of energy once more to condense the sandstorm. Fortunately, his two allies arrived in time to restrain the infuriating beast. Otherwise, had the sandstorm been completely shattered and dissipated into a cloud of dust, he would have gone berserk. Just as the two attacks were about to impact Jizirang's torso, a massive black shadow descended upon him. Dark shadows surrounded the behemoth, forming a black halo. A powerful suction emanated from the halo, instantly deflecting the attacks of Zhuoheng and Yangguan. It was like a beam of light bound for a planet, only to be deflected by the gravity of a black hole, eventually disappearing into the nearby asteroid belt. Their attacks were thus pulled off course, dissipating into the air. The figure of Arfei, the winged claw dragon snake, slowly emerged. Arfei, the winged claw dragon snake, possessed a higher energy level than Jizirang, having already evolved to the pinnacle of the first stage SSS rank, only a step away from the second stage. However, this step felt like an insurmountable chasm, and it had been trapped here for 3 or 4 months. As Liu Ming's most promising dragon pet, it had been slow to break through the barrier of the second stage and become a second stage creature. This resentment towards Liu Ming was palpable. After all, as the offspring of the alien beast Arfei, even without the dragon bloodline, it should have been able to evolve to the second stage. Yet, it was stuck there, motionless. It had vaguely guessed that this might be related to the mysterious disappearance of its master. However, the winged claw dragon snake was helpless in this situation. After all, the soul contracts of the two parties had not been in contact, which also meant that its master was not dead. It could only wait for the master to return, so that it could have the opportunity to evolve to the second level. However, even if it was not at the second level, as the strongest dragon pet closest to the second level, even if the winged claw dragon snake's strength could not be said to be a sure win against a second level evolver, it would not be difficult to contain the opponent. Moreover, its devouring attribute was best at containment. If it faced an ordinary second level evolver, the winged claw dragon snake might really be able to complete the containment. But these people were not ordinary second level evolvers. They were all people in power, real ruthless people. Chapter 286, Ruthless People Join Forces to Hunt Dragons and Snakes, Part 1. Zhuoheng and Yangguan watched the dragon snake effortless blocking their attacks. Their faces grimaced at first, then turned into a grim grin. Do you really think our attacks are so easy to resist? It's said these behemoths are the war pets of the former leader of Ash Castle, hence their protection. Today, let us give you a ride. Your master is dead. What's the point of a pet still being alive? Die. Monster. Unlike Zhuoheng's hostile gaze towards Arfei, the winged claw dragon snake, Yangguan, the tiger, regarded Arfei with a gaze filled with pure hatred. In the apocalypse, Yangguan's hatred for monsters was undeniable. Had it not been for the disaster, he wouldn't have treacherously sacrificed his entire family to survive the monsters more, leaving him completely destitute. In the end, he transferred the hatred he felt for his family, which he had essentially murdered, onto the monsters in this apocalypse, seeking self-liberation and redemption. Even in his cold-bloodedness, personally destroying his own parents, who were in their 60s and 70s, and his wife, who had stood by him through thick and thin for nearly a decade, would have been enough to drive him mad. This was why he hated monsters far more than most. Despite the ironclad and oppressive rule of the Chengmao Iron Fist, some were willing to submit to its rule and remain within its jurisdiction. Iron Fist fought. This was largely due to the relentless efforts of its leader, Yangguan, in exterminating the surrounding monsters. The clearance rate and safety level around Iron Fist Fort rivaled those of Ash Fort. Otherwise, with Yangguan's limited management skills, the ordinary survivors under his command would have fled long ago. After all, in the apocalypse, while human life may be worthless, it is an indispensable resource. Any independent faction outside the eastern safe zone would never consider its numbers excessive. Not only does building combat effectiveness require a population base, but the construction and restoration of facilities like power plants, processing plants, chemical plants, and arsenals also rely on population. These worthless lives are resources that can create value for the rulers. Even Ashford, which has always had a low population requirement, has gathered tens of thousands of survivors in the past 6 months. Within Ashford, small power plants, arsenals, and food processing plants have been established. Although small in scale, they largely meet Ashford's self-sufficiency needs. The moment Yang Wan saw Arfei, the winged clawed dragon snake, murderous intent filled him. The giant, monstrous snake soaring in midair reminded him of the black python that devoured his wife and children. Kill it, was Yang Wan's sole thought. Yang Wan possessed a combination of melee class similar to a boxer and a mage. His class upgrade was to the orange, intermediate class with the potential of level 6, the Tiger Seal Fist Mage. This is one of the origins of the nickname Tiger Absolute. While a fist mage possesses the same formidable physical qualities as a boxer, they also possess the ranged attack attributes of a mage. A Tiger Seal Fist Mage's attacks can penetrate the body, and while their range is somewhat greater than a mage's, it's not significantly greater. Crucially, a Tiger Seal Fist Mage's physical enhancements rival those of a boxer of the same rank, while a boxer is a true melee combatant with physical attributes comparable to a warrior. This makes Tiger Seal Fist a formidable melee combatant with ranged attack capabilities, laying the foundation for his future status as one of the 54 Supreme Masters of Wuling. This class might still have some countermeasures in the later stages of the apocalypse, but for now, a level 2 Tiger Seal Fist Mage, capable of both ranged attacks and incredibly strong melee combat, is no match for Sandstorm Swordmaster Lu Zuan, but he can easily defeat him. He can at least hold his own, or even escape unscathed. At this point, Yang Wan, enraged, no longer exercised his usual caution. With the same purpose as Zeduo Heng, Yang Wan primarily aimed for probing. He clenched his fists into claws. Instantly charging his fists with energy, he combined it with his entire body, leaping forward like a tiger stalking its prey. As he exerted his full strength, a giant tiger, condensed from energy, emerged from Yang Wan's fists and lunged forward. A glint of solemnity flashed in the winged claw dragon snake's enormous eyes. Its intelligence rivaled that of an adult human, and it naturally discerned that its foe was truly prepared. It knew that, if it wasn't properly prepared, it could be seriously injured by this blow. Arfeni first unleashed a gust of dusk devouring fire at the energy tiger, stirring the air with raging winds. Then, a sea of poisonous black mist followed suit. The combined force seemed to weaken the energy tiger somewhat, but the tiger continued its advance. Evil dragon armor. The dragon snake was instantly enveloped in pieces of black jade-like armor, like an armored dragon, charging towards the attacking tiger. Elephant swallowing. The dragon snake's devouring innate ability was unleashed to its fullest potential. Its open maw resembled a black hole, disrupting countless air currents with its immense pull. For a moment, a powerful gust of wind swirled around the dragon snake. However, its power was certainly less impressive than that of the energy tiger. Boom. A resounding crash, like two high-speed trucks colliding on the highway, echoed. The tiger slammed head-on into Arfei, the winged dragon snake. Even with its full power, the dragon snake was still sent flying by the tiger's blow. This scene sent a chill through the hearts of Kinyu and the others, who were still watching from the distant walls. As the strongest of the three beasts, the dragon snake was undoubtedly the anchor of the remaining troops in the absence of Gongweeksin and Fangan, the two second-level evolvers, and Marjun, the leader. If the dragon snake were defeated or even killed, the morale of the remaining troops would be devastating. They would even begin to hesitate to attack the powerful evolver who had killed the dragon snake, fearing they would be slaughtered by the enraged warriors after their defeat. But there was no point in rushing now, their end wasn't in sight. However, the crowds observing the battle from afar on the wall found some comfort in the fact that the dragon snake had simply lost its grip in midair and was knocked back a few times. Fortunately, the attack was only a minor injury for Arfei, who was already fully armed, even clad in the evil dragon armor. By this time, the energy tiger had shrunk considerably, and it seemed that knocking the dragon snake away had consumed a significant amount of its energy. As soon as the dragon snake recovered, it immediately leaped forward and unleashed a torrent of force upon the smaller energy tiger. In a matter of seconds, the enraged dragon snake tore the energy tiger to pieces. After the collision, the energy tiger, its strength and destructive power already reduced by several levels, was no match for the winged claw dragon snake's attack, and was quickly destroyed. Arfeni didn't even abandon the diffused energy, instead opening his devouring maw and swallowing it completely, replenishing his strength. Chapter 287, Ruthless People Join Forces to Hunt Dragons and Snakes, Part 2. Seeing that his first move, the Tiger Seal Fist, imbued with the mighty tiger's soul, had been completely destroyed and devoured, Yang Wan's face grimaced. The Tiger Seal Fist, a master's powerful tiger essence, had also consumed him considerably. He had thought the punch, which he had thought would inflict heavy damage, hadn't achieved the desired effect, leaving him furious. He shouted at his companions, who were still watching from the sidelines, "Zeduo Heng, why aren't you taking action? Do you want this beast to continue its rampage? Yang Wan, why are you so anxious? Am I not preparing for their reinforcement, which could arrive at any moment? Fangan and Gong Weeksin aside, even the cavalry isn't formidable, and could easily put up a fight with you and me. They haven't appeared in such a long time, it seems they're definitely not around. I'll take action now, and together we'll kill this beast." Zeduo Heng protested, frowning. Yang Wan scoffed inwardly. Of all the allied forces, Zeduo Heng was the one he disliked the most. While he considered himself a complete villain and a bad guy, he was also a frankly bad guy. Zeduo Heng was undoubtedly one of those treacherous villains, known as a smiling tiger, whose sweet words betray a hidden dagger. While Lu Zuan was the first to spearhead the coalition's success against Ash Castle, Zeduo Heng's coordinated efforts, uniting the 9 forts, also played a significant role. Had he not been single-mindedly determined to capture Ash Castle and obtain the 4-color altar, the 9 smaller forts wouldn't have participated in this joint military operation. This represented nearly all of the smaller forts in Wuling West City. In other words, not only did no smaller forts in the entire West City come to Ash Castle's aid, but they all joined the joint operation, deploying troops to lay siege to the fort. This was all Zeduo Heng's achievement. However, even those who had temporarily joined forces against Ash Castle weren't united. Otherwise, upon hearing of the attack on their headquarters, 6 smaller forts wouldn't have been defeated, leaving only Lu Zuan's Sandstorm Fort, Zeduo Heng's Hurricane Fort, and his own Iron Fist Fort. Even the 3 remaining factions struggled to unite, each wary of the others. They all knew exactly how well they had prepared for this operation. In short, unless Ash Castle managed to come back, it would be utterly destroyed. Their confidence stemmed from the numerous powerful weapons they had prepared for Ash Castle. Since they considered Ash Castle's eventual destruction a foregone conclusion, the distribution of the resulting profits seemed to be the most pressing issue. Who wouldn't want a larger share? There was only one 4-color altar in all of West City. Everyone wanted to control the distribution of the spoils of victory, and ultimately, even better, to claim ownership of it. Therefore, concealing their strength and preserving it became the 3's primary concern. Zeduo Heng's reluctance to act earlier was likely motivated by a desire to preserve his own strength, not, as he claimed, to guard against the top fighters of Ash Castle, such as Fangan and Gong Weeksin, who hadn't yet taken action. The people who had just delivered the letter asking for help had already explained the situation. Allied troops like Marjan, Gong Weeksin, and Fangan had already been dispatched to attack the various headquarters. They weren't even in Ash Castle. What kind of defense was this? If he hadn't said anything, he believed Zeduo Heng wouldn't have made a move until the very end. Yang Wan knew exactly how treacherous this guy was. He cursed inwardly, but showed no sign of it on the surface. He simply sheathed his fists, which had been poised for attack, and stood there, motionless. It was as if he was saying, "You make the first move, or we'll just waste time." Zeduo Heng glanced at Yang Wan, and then shifted his gaze to the winged claw dragon snake. But the moment his gaze shifted away, a hint of disdain flashed across his face. He naturally saw what Yang Wan was thinking, but this time Yang Wan had wronged him. He was indeed on guard against Fangan and Gong Weeksin. These guys had successfully launched a surprise attack, dividing the coalition forces of over 6,000 into no more than 3,000 men. A full half of them were gone, and the top fighters from the 6 forts had all withdrawn, leaving only the 3 of them to sustain the operation. He didn't believe that Marjan, with his shrewdness and calculation, would have no backup plan. He couldn't help but return. He knew that, even though the 3 forts had deployed their best forces in this joint military operation, even if it ultimately failed, the losses would be shared among them, with each taking a share. If Ash Castle failed this time, it would truly be a thing of the past, completely annihilated. Marjan couldn't help but return. But Yang Wan was losing his patience. In fact, with Yang Wan's strength, he could easily deal with this dragon and snake alone. It would just take some time and effort. He knew Yang Wan's character well. To put it nicely, he was cautious, fearing being schemed against. To put it bluntly, he was timid and incapable of achieving great things. He was undoubtedly afraid that, if he conserved his strength, it would backfire. Little did he know that, if he took action, Marjan's plan might succeed. But he knew that, even if he told Yang Wan all his conjectures, he wouldn't listen. His other personality traits were arrogance, conceit, and extreme self-centeredness, making it difficult for him to listen to others' ideas. It was better not to do it than to waste words. So what if I had to take action? Marjan, come on, I'll show you what absolute strength truly is. Think Fangen and Gongweeksin can escape this disaster alone. Ash Castle is doomed to fail today. Even if all the 6 castle leaders evacuated, there were still 2 specially invited second level evolvers hiding besides the 3 of them. First, take care of this dragon snake that could almost contain a second level evolver. Then, with 5 against 2, Fangen and Gongweeksin, even with their incredible abilities, would surely be defeated. Zeduo Heng swung at the dragon snake like a casual sword strike. Arfei, feeling a chill run down his spine, quickly released dusk-devouring fire to completely envelop himself, taking precautionary measures. Puff. Unexpectedly, the fire devourer's self-defense was no match for it. A silent air blade slashed across the dragon snake's abdomen, not only breaking through the fire devourer's defenses, but also slicing through its previously indestructible, harder than steel evil dragon armor. The air blade then sliced through its scales, leaving a trail of blood. Drops of blood dripped from the wound. A flash of horror crossed the dragon snake's eyes. It had actually been injured like that. The mighty energy tiger had only slightly injured it, not breaching its defenses at all. This sword-wielding human was terrifying. As a second-level evolver with astounding senses, Yang Wan naturally witnessed the dragon snake being instantly slashed by the strangely appearing air blade. Deep fear flashed in his eyes, and he looked at Yang Wan with a wary look. This guy's move was truly a deadly move. President Yang, isn't it time for a joint attack? Let's team up to hunt this monster. I won't take a single ounce of the corpse. I'll just consider it a gift to President Yang, Zeduo Heng said calmly, without even turning his head. Yang Wan was overjoyed upon hearing this. This dragon snake looked like a pinnacle first level SSS rank monster, just one step away from reaching the second level. Furthermore, it possessed dragon blood, making it a truly top tier sacrifice. Zeduo Heng had pledged not to take a cent, so he would have the entire offering to himself. A sacrifice of this caliber was no easy feat, even for him, and the divine grace offered was definitely no ordinary treasure. He immediately struck, with unparalleled decisiveness. Chapter 288, Dying Dragon Snake, a sharp turn for the worse. Yang Wan arched his back slightly, leaning forward, his iron back straight, his muscles stretched, like a bow with an arrow ready, brimming with menace. While Arfei struggled to hold on to Hurricane Fort's leader, Zeduo Heng, Yang Wan suddenly launched himself forward, like a bolt from a bowstring. Waves of air surged behind him, and even the ground he'd stepped on was blasted into a shallow crater by the recoil, sending his entire body soaring into the air. Yang Wan was only 100 meters away from Arfei, the dragon snake. This time, he chose to engage in close combat, rather than using the tiger seal. In the blink of an eye, Yang Wan was close to Arfei. He thrust out with both fists, a powerful gust of wind sweeping from their tips, striking the dragon snake's head with 2 consecutive blows. Bang! Ah-Fei, already struggling against Zeduo Heng's strange sword energy, was further struck by Yang Wan, adding insult to injury. With a wail, Ah-Fei was struck down from over 20 meters in midair, falling helplessly to the ground, barely able to flap his wings. Yang Wan's powerful punches stunned Ah-Fei, leaving him spinning and unable to react. Without even flapping its wings, it plummeted to the ground. The weight of over 10 tons, plummeting from over 20 meters in the air, instantly cratered the ground, sending debris flying and clouds of dust billowing. From afar, the Ash Castle defenders, watching the dragon snake fall from the air, were horrified. Many looked horrified, their faces pale. The moment they saw their strongest beast fall bloodied, they seemed to sense impending disaster. Kinyu and Wang Suchim, the leaders, were also deeply shocked. They had underestimated the power of these second sister evolvers. They hadn't expected the winged claw dragon snake, the strongest beast, to be defeated so quickly by the combined efforts of Zeduo Heng and Yang Guan. This was completely beyond their expectations. Seeing the defenders' morale plummet, Kinyu was about to offer a rallying cry when the falling winged claw dragon snake suddenly burst out of the cloud of dust. Its scales were shattered, and blood was gushing. Two large fist-marked dents etched across its skull, where Yang Guan had struck it. Its snout bled, and even one of its fangs was broken, making it look incredibly miserable. However, seeing the dragon snake still able to stand, after being shot down, the soldiers on the wall cheered before Kinyu could even offer a morale boost. Although Liu Ming had long been gone, the 3 behemoths he left behind were considered guardian beasts and symbols of the Ash Castle by the survivors. Seeing these beasts, whom they considered nearly invincible, nearly beaten to death, was naturally difficult to accept. The dragon snake's renewed strength thrilled them. At that moment, a young man in white, riding a giant cat the size of a bison, leaped onto the wall, followed closely by an even larger dark purple figure. The dark purple figure exuded a fierce aura, suffocating even the ordinary evolutionists on the wall. Lord Sumi, please attack. Kinyu bowed, his tone respectful yet slightly anxious. The arrival was none other than Wu Zhangting, the beast trainer in charge of Sumi, and the purple flame-tailed cat, Sumi. Sumi's power was second only to the dragon snake, a second-level SSS-level evolved creature, though it hadn't yet reached the ultimate SSS level. Seeing his companion, the dragon snake Ah-Fei, being so badly beaten, even though he normally didn't fight her, a wave of sadness washed over him, igniting a boundless rage. A resounding bang erupted from the wall, a section dented by the immense force. Sumi had transformed into a bolt of purple lightning, blazing with violet flames, and shot out towards Yang Wan, who was about to seize the opportunity to pursue and kill Ah-Fei. While Sumi wasn't as powerful as Ah-Fei, the winged claw dragon snake, who had already evolved to the pinnacle of SSS level, in sheer strength, she was no less capable. If the dragon snake was like a formidable knight, relying on its immense mobility and sturdy build to maneuver through enemy lines, then Sumi was a supreme assassin, lurking in the shadows, poised to strike a fatal blow at any moment. Whoosh! Sumi whipped up a gust of wind and quickly dodged before the dragon snake. Her sharp claws, coated in blazing purple flames, collided fiercely with Yang Guan's fists, brimming with energizing energy. The immense recoil sent Yang Guan reeling back only half a step, while Sumi flew backwards over 10 meters, nearly colliding with the already severely injured dragon snake. Sumi roared, her purple flames blazing even more intensely. Through the blazing purple flames, one could faintly see the heat waves radiating from the intense heat. Sumi glanced over her shoulder and saw that Ah-Fei, still slightly dazed, had staggered to his feet and begun attempting to flap his wings for flight. Reassured, she fixed her eyes on the enemy before her, repelling him with a single punch. At that moment, there weren't many level 2 monsters in Wuling City. Level 2 monsters were essentially the leaders of smaller forts, and some leaders hadn't even reached level 2 yet. Sumi, a first level SSS rank evolved creature, possessed dragon bloodline, far surpassed ordinary evolved creatures in strength. His combined power made him a regional hegemon. Unexpectedly, he suffered a minor setback at the hands of this human within the initial encounter. While Sumi stared intently at Yang Guan was also sizing up the massive evolved beast, more tiger-like than cat-like. While Sumi's size was far inferior to the towering monsters that often reached the height of a building, the power it wielded against him was already a force far greater than that of monsters with meager strength. The speed of the giant cat's recent charge was, he thought, comparable to his own maximum speed at full power. Logically, a physically formidable melee fighter like Yang Guan wouldn't be afraid of such a speed-driven monster. However, swiftness was paramount. Otherwise, if reinforcement from Ash Castle arrived, it was easy to imagine what would happen. Die, bastard. Yang Guan grinned fiercely, not giving Sumi any chance to escape. He charged forward once more, surrounded by strong winds and tiger shadows, and rushed towards Sumi. Sumi knew that Arfei was behind her, and there was no way to avoid her. She could only activate the purple flame to the maximum, and try to fight her head on again. Hiss. Before Sumi and Yang Guan could fight, Arfei, the winged-clawed dragon snake, suddenly let out a painful howl. At some point, the moment Sumi rushed out, Zeduo Heng suddenly appeared, and the long sword in his hand, with a strange energy, penetrated Arfei's abdomen, causing the dragon snake to hiss in pain. One sword strike was nothing. In the blink of an eye, Zeduo Heng stabbed no less than 10 times, each one piercing the heart, and the blade went straight to the hilt. The dragon snake's hissing became weaker and weaker. Sumi was shocked when she heard the sound. She saw that her companion was injured again, and was directly beaten into a state of serious injury and dying. She was so angry that she became anxious and distracted. Yang Guan seized the opportunity and knocked her away with a tiger punch. Chapter 289. The zombie tide arrives, a strange scene. Here, Sumi, Jizirong, and their 3 dragon pets engaged the allied forces from the 3 forts in a fierce battle, leaving Kinyu and the others in a state of constant apprehension. After the leaders of the 3 forts were each entangled by a dragon pet, the coalition's slow advance came to a complete standstill. After all, the 24 heavy crossbows and 6 magnetic plasma cannons atop the wall weren't mere decorations. Without a level 2 evolver blocking their way, the coalition would likely suffer casualties by the time they reached the wall. Thus, as Lu Zuan was concentrating his ultimate attack, the coalition's advance came to a complete standstill. However, the gaps in Lu Zuan's killing move, which continuously gathered dust and rock, were disrupted by Jizirong's constant barrage. Furthermore, Jizirong also possessed the ability to control sand, dust, rock, and soil. After such a long period of time, Lu Zuan simply couldn't muster his ultimate move. The remaining coalition experts tried to engage the 3 behemoths. Meanwhile, Kinyu hurriedly ordered the defenders to fire their crossbows and magnetic plasma cannons relentlessly. The sudden, indiscriminate bombardment left everyone in the coalition feeling threatened. Crossbows and plasma were the primary targets for those attempting to approach the behemoths, temporarily hindering the coalition forces from effectively encircling the 3 beasts. However, aside from Jizirong, Lu Zuan was still concentrating his ultimate attack in the center of the sandstorm, unable to deal with it, allowing it to continue to disrupt the already forming sandstorm. Jizirong was repeatedly injured by Zeduo Heng's sword energy, and Sumi, distracted by the clash, was sent flying by a single punch from Yang Guan. The situation was precarious. Kinyu and the others, desperately trying to contain the coalition forces from atop the wall, had reached their limit. Furthermore, although Jizirong was temporarily suppressing the sandstorm, it continued to intensify, albeit slowly, but it would eventually form. By then, Jizirong, Sumi, and Arfei would inevitably be severely injured or even killed. With all 3 behemoths dead, the collapse of the second, and perhaps even the final, line of defense would be inevitable. Even the usually composed Wang Sucheng paled at the thought. The only solution now is to have the 3 behemoths retreat and hold the enemy at the final line of defense, almost thoroughly deployed and prepared. Wang Sucheng sighed, slowly addressing the helpless Kinyu, his face clouded with gloom. Old Wang, it's not that I don't want Sumi and the others to retreat. Putting aside the fact that they consider us the guardian behemoths of Ash Castle, I can't bear to see them die here, considering they're the last remaining memories of our boss. But you see the situation. Yang Guan and Zeduo Heng will definitely not let them go, and we are too busy to do anything else. If we divert our forces to help them retreat, the line will be torn apart in an instant, leaving an unstoppable hole. Even we won't be able to reach the final line, Kinyu lamented, his expression grave and his voice heavy. He knew that retreating to the third line of defense was his last resort, but since the 3 dragon pets couldn't leave, neither could they. Without them, the third line of defense would be nothing more than a joke. Both he and Wang Sucheng had underestimated the terrifying power of a second level evolver. Without 3 dragon pets to withstand the might of the enemy's top evolvers, most of the defenses on the last line of defense were a joke. Destruction and collapse were only a matter of time. What is that? Just as Wang Sucheng fell into deep thought upon hearing this, the soldiers on the wall, alternating between defense and defense, suddenly cried out in surprise. Both stringing and firing a heavy crossbow demanded immense strength and stamina. Each team consisted of 3 people, 2 responsible for stringing the crossbow, 1 for controlling the firing direction, and striking the target. Each heavy crossbow had 2 teams, 9 in total, assigned to each group, rotating in action. After each team fired 10 arrows, the next team would take over, resting and recovering. This was the only way to ensure a continuous rain of arrows. There were over 100 strong and capable young soldiers manning 24 heavy crossbows. Wang Sucheng looked in the direction of the exclaiming man, and couldn't help but look horrified. At the breach in the first line of defense previously breached by the coalition forces, a swift stream of figures surged towards the fort of ashes. The shadows were so numerous that at first glance, they resembled a vast dark mass. Some of them were extremely terrifying. Is God's will to destroy Fort of Ashes? Kinyu also saw the movement from that direction. They saw mutated, cannibalistic corpses, surging through the first line of defense, and rapidly towards the second wall. The entire Fort of Ashes defenders, facing the incoming tide of corpses, witnessed this despairing scene. The coalition forces were already mounting attacks, and now another wave of corpses was approaching from further afield. It truly was a double whammy. Kinyu was filled with pessimism when he heard Wang Sucheng say, "I don't think this might be a bad thing." From his tone, Wang Sucheng seemed to sigh in relief at the sight of the zombie tide. "Old Wang, the zombie tide is right under our noses, and you still say it's not a bad thing. We saw it, but those guys haven't noticed yet," Wang Sucheng said calmly. Kinyu looked again, and, as expected, saw the coalition forces facing him, their backs to the incoming zombie tidal wave. They seemed genuinely unaware of the impending wave. Kinyu seemed to have guessed a possibility and quickly asked, "Old Wang, what do you mean? Are they going to attack us first, or the coalition forces?" Wang Sucheng asked with a smile. Kinyu laughed heartily. "Looks like we'll just have to sit back and watch the coalition forces show. If the zombies were to attack the city, they would first have to face the coalition forces. They could only break through them before they could reach the city. And before Ash Castle fell, the first to suffer would undoubtedly be those coalition scum. What about Ji Zerang and the others?" Kinyu asked, still somewhat worried. Wang Sucheng, however, was reassured. Evolved mutant cannibals possess an innate biological instinct to seek advantage and avoid harm. They are not so foolish as to seek death for no reason. Ji Zerang and his men are far superior to these cannibals. These mutants must be crazy to ignore the fattest of the coalition forces and attack hard to catch foes like Ji Zerang. Of course, the cannibals are crazy to begin with. When the zombie horde was within 500 or 600 meters of the coalition forces, they focused their attention on the 3 behemoths and the heavy crossbows and plasma cannons atop the walls. Unexpectedly, an attack came from behind. And the attackers weren't the returning reinforcement from Ash Castle, but a terrifying horrific horde of zombies. Even after 10 years, as Liu Ming remembered, people's fear of zombie hordes, which ranked low on the disaster scale, had waned. But now, in the first year of the new calendar, zombie hordes remained one of the most terrifying dangers. Chapter 290, Familiar with the Crazy Corpse, Belated Reinforcement, Part 1. A foul odor wafted in the wind, a horrific atmosphere nearly frozen at the second line of defense at Ash Castle. The 163 soldiers stationed on the defensive walls wore solemn expressions, their faces etched with determination. The remaining combatants should number 280, but over 100 more, under Kinyu's orders, had already deployed at the final line of defense. Beyond this final line, lay the tens of thousands of Ash Castle survivors. If one line of defense were breached, those survivors would become prey. While the apocalypse wasn't far removed from civilization, and the slave trade of slavery hadn't yet taken root, the practice of trading people as supplies to survive a gathering places in need of labor was common knowledge among the high-ranking survivors of Wuling. It was likely that after the city was breached, the fate of the Ash Castle survivors would be no better. Hurricane Castle was one of the gathering places for survivors involved in the human resource trade. Unfortunately, to make matters worse, they now faced not only the combined forces of the three forts, but also an endless tide of corpses. This sudden onslaught of zombies posed an even more terrifying threat. First to approach the defensive wall were hordes of ordinary cannibals. These, still relatively unmutated, proved far more formidable than their counterparts from a few months prior. They possessed swift speed, greater strength, and explosive power, approaching the level of true mutants. These cannibals, now on the verge of evolution, were no longer a single-handed enemy for ordinary humans armed with weapons. Even more terrifying was the multitude of mutants, each with its own distinct appearance, yet equally hideous and ferocious, mingling with the ordinary cannibals, rapidly advancing towards the wall. Even before they reached the wall, some mutants, whose evolutionary changes had awakened ranged attack abilities, had already begun launching long-range attacks. For example, numerous ranged attacks from mutants with various abilities and deformed organs capable of long-range attacks had already landed on the wall, forcing the defenders to dodge or defend. However, these mutants' ranged attacks were often intercepted by the coalition forces. Suddenly, with heavy crossbows and plasma cannons at their front and zombies behind them, the coalition forces were utterly disastrous, their men and horses falling apart in the indiscriminate long-range attacks from both sides. The initial zombie horde had already penetrated the coalition's formation, leaving the temporary coalition commander helpless and forced to allocate a portion of their forces to deal with the incoming zombies. Kinyu and Wang Sucheng's eyes flashed upon seeing this, and they quickly ordered the defenders to unleash their firepower, increasing their intensity. Countless arrows rained down like a torrential rain, putting the coalition forces under immense pressure. The commander even considered a temporary retreat, responding to the incoming zombies from outside the long-range attack radius of the Ash Castle defenses. However, the three leaders of the three castles were locked in a fierce battle with the behemoths, leaving no one in a position to make such a decision. The coalition forces faced not only the zombie horde, but also the hail of arrows and plasma attacks, were utterly exhausted and scrambling. Zhuo Heng and Yang Wan were no longer as calm and composed as before, but looked a little anxious. Although these zombies were nothing to the two of them who were extremely powerful, and not even a single blind mutant cannibal corpse dared to attack them, at this moment, it was their subordinates who faced these zombies head-on. If a few people died, it would be their forces that would be damaged in the end. Quick battle, quick decision. Both of them were furious. One of them transformed into a ferocious tiger and pounced on Sumi, who was already seriously injured, with damaged internal organs and blood dripping from the corners of her mouth. The other one's blade jumped and flashed, stabbing at Arfei, the winged claw dragon snake, who had no power to fight back. Both of them were fighting to quickly deal with the giant beast and reinforce their subordinates. Ouch. Sumi's defenses were weak to begin with, and the repeated blows drastically slowed her speed. Finally, she succumbed to Yang Wan's increasingly brutal and ferocious attacks. Hit by the tiger seal in the head, the immense force flung her body over 10 meters into the air. Her skull shattered. She collapsed to the ground, unable to recover. She wailed and struggled mightily. Yang Wan, grinning, slowly approached, preparing the final fatal blow. Arfei, dragging his equally battered body to his aid, tried to rush to his aid, but Zhuo Heng clung to him, holding him tightly. Whoosh. Yang Wan glanced disdainfully at the dragon and snake still attempting reinforcement. He suddenly unleashed a surge of energy, charging forward. His fists clenched the tiger seal, a tiger roar, and a tiger shadow materialized. Unleashing his full power from the second stage, his fists charged with the force of 1,000 pounds. Sumi's body languished, her skull shattered, and blood splattered all over the ground. She lay motionless, staring intently at the incoming blows, seemingly waiting for death. Roar. In this desperate moment, Ji Zerang abandoned the sandstorm conjured by Lu Zuan and dodged, blocking Sumi. Boom. countless energy sandstone was shattered into tiny grains by the tiger seal's immense force. The tiger seal finally penetrated Zhenliang's defensive sand field, striking Zhenliang with its remaining force, sending him flying. Zhenliang tried to steady himself, but found himself powerless against the overwhelming force. He was forced to retreat, ultimately crashing into his already severely injured and dying companion, Sumi. Yang Wan's punches were fierce, and he dodged again, striking Zhenliang with 2 more tiger seals. Zhenliang was sent flying, carrying Sumi with him. Both dragon pets were also blasted back by the immense force, crashing into the swarm of corpses behind them. Blood immediately splattered. Both dragon pets, caught in the swarm of corpses, were left near death. Previously, the zombies had been deterred from approaching the dragon pet due to its powerful aura. Now, with 2 powerful creatures on the verge of death within their grasp, the zombies, unfettered, swarmed around the dragon pet, eager to attack, as if facing some truly delicious delicacy. However, the dragon pet's still powerful aura prevented them from approaching. Some of the more powerful, undaring mutants had already begun licking the dragon pet's spilled blood, even devouring its flesh. Ho ho ho. Just as several air-level mutants had crowded in front of the dragon pet, preparing to attack the dying creature, a high, piercing roar echoed. A malformed mutant, its fists shaped like shields, roared in the distance, its crimson eyes fixed intently on the direction of the 2 fallen dragon pets. The A-level mutants, upon hearing the roar and looking in the direction of the malformed mutant, a flash of fear crossed their eyes. They immediately abandoned the idea of feasting on their dying prey and turned to join the besieging coalition in the hunt. The roar of the deformed shield-type mutant just now conveyed only one message, that is, both prey belonged to it. When the A-level mutants heard this roar declaring ownership, they had no intention of resisting or fighting. This was because this shield-type mutant was one of the 3 supreme kings of their zombie group. The shield-type mutant slowly walked towards Sumi and Zhenliang. Wherever it went, all the cannibal corpses would obediently make way for it. When the mutant came close to Sumi, Sumi opened her eyes blurred by blood. "Who are you?" Sumi asked with a mental wave. She sensed a familiar aura on this ferocious and violent monster, whose aura was no less than that of her at its peak. That was the aura of her master. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 291, Familiar with the Crazy Corpse, Belated Reinforcement, Part 2. Why did this monster carry the aura of its master? Sumi didn't know. But the spiritual fluctuations emanating from the monster, and the familiar aura within the spiritual connection, convinced him it was the master's. But it wasn't the master. Why? Sumi wondered. Although it could feel its life force rapidly draining away, it was dying. It was severely injured. The force of the human warrior's fist had penetrated its limbs and bones, shattering its internal organs, and causing a large portion of them to necrotize under the force. The massive monster's scollard eyes flashed a hint of humanity as it glanced at Sumi and Zhenliang, then turned away and rejoined the battle. That look revealed pity, sympathy, and concern. It was hard to imagine a mutant capable of such a human expression. Could it really be just a monster? Sumi didn't know. When the shield-shaped mutant departed, and the aura of its master vanished once more, Sumi closed his eyes again. He knew he was doomed, and all he could do now was close his eyes and wait for death. Although Sumi still had numerous giant cats under his command, knowing the dangers of this treacherous journey, he kept them all in his last line of defense. He hoped to unleash their might in the final stand, rather than follow him to his death. The surrounding monsters now dared not approach the 2 dragon pets. One of their 3 kings had warned them that they were the king's prey, and no one dared to touch them. Although the mutants made no further move to attack the dying dragon pets, Yang Wan had no intention of letting the 2 dying beasts go. He glanced at the corpses in confusion, wondering why the powerful mutant, clearly reaching the pinnacle of the 1st grade SSS rank and nearing the 2nd grade, hadn't attacked the 2 beasts. However, he didn't bother to dwell on it and charged forward again, ready to finish the job. He gathered tiger seals of energy in his fists, the violent energy whipping the air with a whistling sound. 2 tiger seals blasted out, striking Sumi and Gizeli Rang respectively. Neither offered any resistance, and could only watch helplessly as the tiger seals approached. The concentration of the 2 tiger seals consumed a significant amount of Yang Guan's energy, but he couldn't care less at this point. The zombie horde, led by 3 top-tier SSS rank zombies, and supplemented by numerous advanced mutants above A rank, had already begun slaughtering the coalition forces, leaving his own troops suffering heavy casualties. Ding ding. 2 crisp collisions echoed. Thinking the 2 behemoths were doomed, Yang Guan, who had just turned to reinforce the coalition forces, saw his eyes twitch wildly. 2 silver short spears streaked through the air, launching from 800 or 900 meters away with a sonic boom and a ripple of white air. They accurately struck the 2 tiger seals. Before they could reach Gizeli Rang and Sumi, the tiger seals collided with the short spears, exploding in mid-air. Zeduo Heng, who was also bringing the winged claw dragon snake Arfei to near death, also felt a jolt in his brow. The dragon snake's devouring talent was truly formidable. Even after being severely damaged by the combined efforts of him and Yang Guan, the dragon snake had managed to hold on until now, remaining completely defenseless. This momentarily irritated him. Seeing 2 short spears, seemingly hurled from the sky, rescue the 2 behemoths from Yang Guan's grasp, his heart pounded. Oh no. The very enemy he'd been guarding against had finally appeared. Are you courting death? A furious roar echoed from afar. A figure in brilliant silver armor, accompanied by a force no less numerous than the defenders on the wall, scurried towards them from the edge of their field of vision. Having had his fatal strike blocked, Yang Guan's eyes blazed with murderous intent as he bellowed word by word, Fangen. He couldn't think of anyone else in Wuling other than Fangen who could break his tiger seal with such a long-range spear. The crowd on the wall, observing the situation, initially felt despair and indignation, believing the behemoths they were protecting were doomed. The few remaining defenders could only manage to hold their ground, let alone save them. Among the defenders, apart from the leader, Qin Yu, there was no other combat type evolved class above rank A seeing the beast rescued, and their team's top fighter, the Iron Knight captain of the Steel Hood Knights, arriving for reinforcement. They were all overjoyed. Some of the more tense members wept tears of joy. Old Wang. We did it. We did it. Qin Yu, known for his calm demeanor, couldn't help but cheer excitedly to his deputy, Wang Sucheng, who was standing beside him. Yes, we held on, Wang Sucheng exclaimed with a sigh of relief. But then he changed the subject, his expression becoming more serious. But old Qin, we can't celebrate too soon. Captain Fang is just one man. And the other side has at least 3 second level fighters. Yes, I got carried away. Qin Yu quickly suppressed his euphoria, his expression also becoming more serious. Fangen had indeed returned for reinforcement, but the other side still had 3 fighters. Fangen could easily hold his own against 1, but holding his own against 2 was already precarious. Holding his own against 3 was a complete loss, and he would be defeated sooner or later. Bang. Seeing Fangen charging at him with a furious expression, Zeduo Heng's usually calm expression took on a serious tone. With a single blow of his sword, he unleashed a whirlwind, sending the now defenseless dragon and snake flying. He then rushed towards Yang Guan, ready to confront Fangen together. As one of the 2 strongest fighters in Ash Castle, they had naturally gathered considerable information. Yang Guan's strength lay in his class's ability to both close combat and ranged attacks, but this strength was no match for Fangen. Fangen's class, the Steel Hood Knight, was also a melee class, boasting superior defense and physical and endurance benefits, though his explosive power was slightly inferior. However, his insanely strong defense largely negated Yang Guan's explosive power. As for Yang Guan's ranged attacks, Fangen could counter them with his spear throwing technique. Furthermore, spear throwing was more energy efficient, requiring only a slight stamina expenditure, making it more suitable for prolonged engagements. He knew that Yang Guan's ranged attack, the Tiger Seal, consumed a significant amount of energy. In short, if fighting alone, Yang Guan's immense burst wouldn't be enough to break Fangen's defense, and his ranged attacks would be completely suppressed. Against the Steelheart Knight's Steelheart domain, any ranged attack would likely be suppressed. Therefore, Yang Wan seemed no match for Fangen. This was why Zeduo Heng rushed to his aid. Seeing Zeduo Heng charging forward, seemingly determined to stand by Yang Wan, Fangen's fury remained undimmed. The boss's 3 dragon pets had been beaten to the brink of death today. If the boss returned one day and learned that all his dragon pets had been slain, how would he face him? Furthermore, the 3 dragon pets had been of immense assistance to him for so long. If it weren't for their presence, Ash Castle would have been destroyed 6 months after the boss's disappearance, and there would be no such thing as today. He considered the 3 dragon pets his comrades and allies, and seeing their companions beaten to the point of death, his fury remained unquenchable. He first threw out 8 or 9 short spears in succession, and then held the long spear, dancing like a long dragon. The silver dragon swept towards Yang Wan like lightning. Fangen's eyes were cold and his heart was filled with murderous intent. Chapter 292, Phantom Blue Starry Sky, Gun overwhelms Blue Tiger. Even standing shoulder to shoulder with Zeduo Heng, Yang Wan should have the upper hand in a 2-on-1 battle. Yet, seeing 9 short spears launched at him in a triangular formation, blocking his retreat at speeds exceeding the sound barrier, he could not conceal his shock. Although he had long heard of Fangen's prowess, and had even faced him on more than one occasion, it was only now that he realized the true strength of the Steel Hood Knight. The power of each incoming silver short spear surpassed even the might of his tiger seal punches, and Yang Wan simply could not unleash so many tiger seals in such a short period of time. This was not simply a matter of speed and explosive power, but more importantly, his body's ability to withstand such explosive force. Those with abnormally strong physiques like the Steel Hood Knight were not included in this category. He could withstand the explosions of supersonic short spears several times, perhaps even 10 times more than he could. Yang Wan lost his previous composure. He swung his arms, a pale blue halo gradually emerging from the tips of his fists. A fist shrouded in phantom blue starlight slowly materialized above Yang Wan's fists, enveloping his 10 fingers, palms, backs of his hands, and wrists, eventually enveloping the lower half of his forearm. Under Fangen's fierce attack, Yang Wan finally drew his weapon. The phantom blue secret star gloves, a white 8-star item, were Yang Wan's most powerful weapon. As the phantom blue gloves appeared, Yang Wan clenched his slightly relaxed fists. A surge of power surged from the depths of the gloves, transforming into a warm current of energy that instantly flowed through his entire body. Bathed in this energy flow, every joint in Yang Wan's body glowed with a pale blue starlight. His fists retreated forward seemingly witheringly, as if a blue starry sky descended. Standing beneath the starry sky, a giant tiger, standing between heaven and earth, roared and raised its head, waving its sharp claws to swat at the incoming supersonic short spears. Its claws flapped continuously, sending 6 supersonic short spears flying. Even the last 3, despite the tiger's might, were unable to withstand them. They all pierced the tiger's starlight-formed body. After the giant tiger's body was pierced by the supersonic spears, it rapidly deflated like a balloon pierced by a needle, ultimately dissolving into phantom blue starlight and merging into the azure sky. Yang Wan blocked the 9 supersonic spears. However, Yang Wan's eyes showed no joy, and instead, a grimace. Others might not have seen it from his appearance, but he knew full well that the phantom blue star tiger attack, one of his most powerful killing moves, had consumed an immense amount of energy. The cost of blocking these 9 supersonic spears was simply not worth the effort. Even if he didn't want to block, he couldn't. With his speed and reflexes, he wasn't yet at the level to dodge a supersonic attack. For Fangen, these 9 supersonic spears might have been just a preemptive move, but they forced him to reveal all his cards. Yang Wan was furious, but his expression remained unchanged. He stared intently at Fangen, who was wielding a dragon-like silver spear, as if facing a formidable enemy. As Fangen entered the area enveloped by the phantom blue sky, he felt as if he were mired in a quagmire. A soft, yet resilient invisible force enveloped him, instantly thwarting his attack. Steel Heart. Fangen roared, thrusting his spear forward. The Steel Heart domain transformed into a silver ripple, imperceptible to the naked eye, spreading into the surrounding air. The sense of restraint instantly vanished. The silver spear's might, previously diminished by the phantom blue sky, was enhanced by the steel heart domain, its tip piercing Yang Wan, who stood braced beneath the phantom blue sky. Like a truly living silver dragon, the steel heart spear pierced the air and, in a single stride, reached Yang Wan. Yang Wan was momentarily horrified. The phantom blue sky had only restrained him for less than half a second before being broken. This was the strongest domain power of his phantom blue secret starfists. How could this be possible? However, in the midst of a fierce battle, Yang Wan dared not lose his focus for even a moment. Even though his domain was broken, he steadied himself. Crossing his fists, he gave a powerful jolt. A phantom blue starry sky, its color deepening, its scope greatly reduced from hundreds of square meters to dozens in front of him. A giant tiger, its color changing from light blue to dark blue, emerged from the starry sky and charged head-on at the spear, flying like a silver dragon. The dark blue tiger swung its millstone-sized claws, striking the side of the spear tip, deflecting it. Fangen, standing behind the spear, saw the spear's back being deflected and immediately exerted force with both hands. A surge of power flowed from the spear shaft into the tip, and the silver dragon, as if about to take flight, suddenly straightened its direction, the spear tip piercing the tiger's claw. Puff! The tiger's claw was instantly pierced by the spear tip, and blue starlight streamed rapidly from the wound left by the spear tip. The aura of the giant deep blue tiger weakened as the blue starlight faded. The more blue starlight drained from the tiger's wound, the weaker its aura became. Seeing his own phantom blue starry sky tiger seal crippled in a single blow, Yang Wan's expression suddenly changed. He unleashed a series of phantom blue fist seals, each transforming into a series of miniature phantom blue tigers that pounced into the blue sky. The sky then showered down vast swaths of blue starlight like falling snowflakes, plunging into the wound of the injured phantom blue tiger like moths to a flame. The phantom blue tiger's weakening aura ceased, and the wound healed, seemingly fading starlight. Seeing the phantom blue tiger's rapid recovery, Fangen exerted his strength once more, shaking his spear and charging forward like a snake slithering around its prey. The entire spear struck the tiger. The phantom blue tiger roared, its body limp, and was instantly knocked to the ground. Fangen thrust his spear upward once more, tearing off a chunk of blue flesh from the tiger's back. Starlight flashed once more. Yang Wan was forced to expend energy once more to restore its strength. The phantom blue tiger's defenses weren't as weak as they appeared. It was simply Fangen's spear's sheer force. Each strike was accompanied by the suffocating, oppressive feeling of the steel heart field, which enveloped the enemy like mercury. This made it impossible for the phantom blue tiger to evade, forcing it to confront head-on. Zhuo Heng, who hadn't yet attacked, saw his companion falling into a disadvantage. He frowned, raising his sword, its tip pointed diagonally at the ground, ready to strike. He had intended to attack Gong Weixin, who hadn't yet appeared, but his unworthy companion was being pinned down by Fangen. Defeat was inevitable, and he could no longer remain indifferent. A gust of air swirled rapidly around the sword's blade, gradually forming a white wave of air that grew in power, like a storm about to strike. Fangen, on the other side, seemed unfazed by Zhuo Heng's sudden attack, continuing to aim his spear straight at Yang Wan. Yang Wan cursed inwardly, "I'm not alone against your companions. Why do you keep chasing me and hitting me?" Chapter 293, Steel Heart Amulet, Sacrifice of 1,000 Guns. Just as Fangen had Yang Wan practically unable to fight back, the air currents from Zhuo Heng's long sword took shape, a wave of sword energy spanning hundreds of meters, its power undiminished as it charged towards Fangen. Fangen remained oblivious to the impending danger, crushing Yang Wan with every strike. His phantom blue starry tiger seal shattered once. The immense effort required to summon the phantom blue starry tiger for the second time had left Yang Wan's face slightly pale, evidently drained of his vital energy. A sharp, piercing sound, like a blade slicing through steel, echoed. The hurricane-like sword energy slashing towards Fangen collided with a palm-sized silver amulet. The amulet, pierced by the sword energy, erupted in a dazzling, blinding silver light. The surrounding coalition forces were blinded by the silver light, as if struck by a flashbang, momentarily losing sight. The silver light formed an oval shield, impenetrable against the hurricane sword energy. Even the destructive hurricane energy that burst into the shield's defenses was reduced to a tenth of its original strength. Upon striking Fangen's molten steel armor, it merely created a spark that dissipated into the air, hardly a concern. The Steel Heart Amulet, the Steel Heart Knight's signature defensive ability. This was why Fangen dared to ignore Zeduo Heng's sword energy and pursue Yang Wan relentlessly. Even with his exceptionally formidable defenses as a Steel Heart Knight, his Steel Heart domain in flesh and blood alone would not be enough to withstand the Hurricane sword energy. However, the Steel Heart Amulet had a lifespan. After depleting its energy, after blocking the Hurricane sword energy, it would require at least 12 hours of recovery and accumulation before it could be activated a second time. Before the Steel Heart Amulet's energy ran out, Yang Wan must be severely damaged or even killed. Fangen couldn't help but glance at Ji Zhenrong and Sumi, who were already nearing death. His eyes were filled with coldness and ruthlessness. Yang Wan must die. Steel Thousand Spears sacrifice. The Steel Heart Knight's ultimate, retreat to advance killing move. Fangen suddenly retracted his spear, sending Yang Wan into a state of great joy. Fangen had never been a steelman, and his physical strength had already reached its limit. After retracting the Steel Heart spear, Fangen unexpectedly held it upside down. Then, with a leap, he grasped the spear in midair. Silver energy erupted from his body, and the heavy energy of Mercury surged into the Steel Heart spear. The Steel Heart spear suddenly seemed to possess immense force, slamming into the ground. Rumble. Like a meteorite hitting the ground, the surface cracked, but strangely, the deep crater everyone had imagined did not appear. Seeing the spear crash to the ground, Yang Wan's secret joy was suddenly replaced by an uncontrollable fear. Like a bite from a venomous snake, the toxin slowly seeped through the wound and into the heart, a deadly threat looming. Get out of the way. Must get out of the way. The 6th dimensional perception of a second level evolver has reached a level of sensitivity unimaginable to ordinary people. It's far more powerful than the legendary 6th sense. Yang Wan knew this move, unheard of and unseen, was definitely Fangen's killer move. If he couldn't avoid it, he might not die, but he would definitely be seriously injured. He was incredibly confident in his perception. With this in mind, Yang Wan commanded the Phantom Blue Tiger to desperately pounce on Fangen, entangling this madman. He himself retreated madly, retreating behind Zeduo Heng in the blink of an eye. Zeduo Heng cursed him inwardly, calling him a coward. His speed was no less than Yang Wan's, and he also retreated rapidly. Naturally, he also sensed the fierce murderous intent and intense threat of Fangen's move. Want to leave? Die. Fangen raised his ordinary yet stern face, roaring at the two retreating men, trying to escape his attack range. Boom. The earth roared like a flash flood before it erupted. A resounding explosion sent waves of sound radiating outward, so loud it instantly drowned out the clashing of countless humans and cannibal corpses. One after another, meter-long silver spears emerged from the ground and soared into the sky. These spears were formed entirely of energy, with Fangen at the center, and roughly 90 degrees in front of him. Countless spears formed a dense fan-shaped formation, piercing the hapless coalition forces and cannibal corpses one by one. In the blink of an eye, no fewer than 1,000 spear attacks erupted from the ground. At the end of the fan-shaped attack, a vast silver energy barrier appeared, like a barrier blocking any creature that tried to escape. Yang Wan and Zeduo Heng happened to be caught in it. There's no escape. Hold on. Zeduo Heng shouted at Yang Wan with a gloomy expression that almost dripped with tears. Yang Wan paused at the sound, growling like a cornered beast by its hunters. This bastard wants to keep us like this? How naive. It's going to take time to break this barrier together. Let's resist these spears together. Zeduo Heng casually slashed at the silver barrier with a wave of sword energy. He knew that with the barrier's defenses, it would be impossible to break it in a short time. There was no choice but to resist. Rather than expending energy attacking the barrier, it was better to directly block the attack. Hurricane Army Fierce Slash. Zeduo Heng slashed away several spears that soared from the ground and took the lead. A fierce gust of air lifted him into the air, sweeping up countless debris. At this moment, he stared coldly at Fangen in the distance, like the god of wind. Then he averted his gaze and thrust out with his sword, wrapped in endless gusts of air. The air swirled into a hurricane, rushing towards the spears below. Each of these spears emerging from the ground was no less powerful than the previous supersonic short spears. 9 supersonic short spears alone forced Yang Wan to unleash his killing blow, let alone the dozens or even hundreds of long spears surging into the sky. Although Zhuo Heng's hurricane force sword energy shattered most of the spears, some still managed to escape and pierce Zhuo Heng. Zhuo Heng could only resist them with his sword, and the immense force contained in the spears nearly brought him to the point of vomiting blood. His physique wasn't particularly strong, at least not as strong as Yang Wan's. After being struck by the spears several times in succession, he suffered lung injuries and coughed up blood. Yang Wan, come on, I'll recover first. Zhuo Heng shouted at Yang Wan, who was already poised for attack. If he continued to block like this, he would surely be seriously injured. Yang Wan's expression was solemn, but within this solemnity was a hint of ruthlessness. He knew Fang An was determined to kill him, but this attack covered such a wide area, and the cost was undoubtedly terrifying. If he could block this wave of attacks, Fang An would have no strength to fight again. Together with Zhuo Heng, he could easily kill him. Aren't you going to kill me, Fang An? I'll cripple you later. If you're not dead, I'll make you taste the pain of being hacked into pieces. Yang Wan frantically injected Yuan Qi into the phantom blue boxing gloves, his aura rapidly increasing. He leaned forward slightly, pouncing forward, his power exploding, like a fierce tiger on the hunt, brimming with savagery and strength. Chapter 294, Steelheart Crisis, Sandstorm Rages. Within the fan-shaped barrier, centered on Fang An, the entire earth resembled a rampaging hedgehog, continuously shooting out silver spears. With a whooshing sound, they soared into the sky. Fang An, however, maintained the same stance he had just held when he slammed his spear into the ground. Silver energy continuously flowed along the spear shaft into the ground beneath him. When the concentrated energies attack emerged from the ground, it transformed into countless spears. This was the principle of the Steelheart Thousand Spears Festival. Its greatest strength wasn't its explosive power, but its range and number of attacks. As long as Fang An's energy wasn't depleted, and the flow of energy continued, the Steelheart Thousand Spears Festival's attack could theoretically continue indefinitely within the fan-shaped barrier. Of course, this was only theoretical, as everyone has their own limits. Even if Fang An's energy consumption could sustain it, his body would reach its limit, unable to withstand the recoil of the Steelheart Thousand Spears Festival, causing the barrier to collapse, and the attack to end. However, even if Fang An couldn't withstand the backlash of this move indefinitely, he could certainly hold out for a few minutes. Cripple me. Though still in the Thousand Spears sacrifice state, Fang An's 5 senses remained sharp, and he naturally heard Yang Wan's harsh words from within the barrier. A hint of sarcasm flickered across Fang An's lips. This time, Yang Wan's fists no longer conjured a giant energy tiger phantom within his fists. Instead, his entire body was enveloped in phantom blue starlight, a star blue tiger looming over him. He seemed a ferocious tiger roaring beneath the starry sky. With each strike of his tiger claws, at least 4 or 5 spears were deflected, or even shattered by the claws. I want to see what you, Yang Wan, have in you to cripple me. 1,000 spears through the heart. Fang An's left hand, tightly gripping the spear shaft, suddenly loosened its grip and gently swung it in Yang Wan's direction. The area suddenly felt as if imprisoned by an invisible immense force. The entire Steelheart domain enveloped the area where Yang Wan stood. Then, the spears soaring into the sky from other areas of the Thousand Spears Festival barrier vanished. Before Zhuo Heng and Yang Wan could even register a flicker of joy within the barrier, the ground beneath their feet suddenly roared. Rumble. Spears, 10 times denser than before, shrouded in silver light, soared into the sky. Bang, bang, bang. Yang Wan's phantom blue tiger only managed to shatter a dozen of the spears before the rest pierced its body. The phantom blue tiger's shadow instantly collapsed, and Yang Wan reappeared in midair, blood oozing from the corner of his mouth, clearly wounded. Seeing Zhuo Heng's injury, Zhuo Heng realized that relying on his companion was a pipe dream. With a sudden burst of force, he swung his sword into a wind wheel. Hurricane spin. Storm roar. 2 killing moves unleashed in quick succession. Countless gusts of wind materialized from thin air within the barrier. Spears thrust towards the 2 were deflected by the fierce wind, and the few that remained steadfast in their pursuit were easily dodged. Fangen, you're indeed powerful, but unfortunately, you met me. Zhuo Heng shouted confidently, controlling the raging wind to counter the relentless thousand spears sacrifice. Watching Fangen, still struggling to maintain his thousand spears sacrifice in the distance. Seeing the thousand spears sacrifice struggling to hit its target amidst the hurricane's force, Fangen's expression darkened. A seasoned warrior, since the advent of the apocalypse, Fangen realized he had made a grave mistake. His ultimate killer move, the Steel Heart Thousand Spears Sacrifice, was indeed powerful. If it had been a one-on-one encounter with Yang Wan, he was certain he would have been slain. But now, with Zhuo Heng in the picture, the Thousand Spears Sacrifice, no matter how powerful, would be useless if it missed its target. He considered ending the Thousand Spears Sacrifice to preserve his strength, but the thought faded only briefly. He saw his companions defending the wall in the distance, his dying dragon pet, and the sandstorm summoned by Ruzan, now over 10 stories high. The Steel Heart Thousand Spears Sacrifice had consumed so much of his vital energy. If he gave up now, his efforts would be in vain. He might be able to hold off the combined might of Zhuo Heng and Yang Wan for a short while, but that would require them to absolutely unite against him. Otherwise, if they stopped working together, he could only contain one of them at best. The addition of a second-tier warrior would inevitably lead to a faster collapse of his defenses. Moreover, without the containment power of the Thousand Spears Sacrifice barrier, Lu Xuan's massive sandstorm would be completely inaccessible to him. Indeed, the primary goal of the Steel Heart Thousand Spears Sacrifice wasn't to kill Yang Wan or Zhuo Heng, but to defend against Lu Xuan, who was also trapped within the barrier. Lu Xuan was the strongest of the three, and his sandstorm was terrifying. If he couldn't resist it, allowing Lu Xuan to reach the defenses would inevitably lead to their collapse. So he couldn't give up, at least not now. Even if he couldn't kill Yang Wan and Zhuo Heng, he had to contain them. Aside from the 3 already defeated dragon pets, he was the only one capable of fighting 3 second-tier revolvers. Sorry for the wait, you two. Suddenly, a cold voice echoed over the battlefield. Beyond a hint of disdain, the voice was devoid of any emotion, like a lofty god looking down upon mortals. Zhuo Heng and Yang Wan were instantly overjoyed upon hearing this voice. Though the tone of the voice displeased them both, even if it betrayed even more disdain, they didn't care at the moment. After all, Fangen's desperate efforts had strained the two men immensely. Now that Lu Xuan had finally completed his finishing move, it was a timely help, the final straw that broke the camel's back. As the voice faded, a massive sandstorm swirled and moved at a rapid speed of dozens of revolutions per second. The violent sand and gravel slammed into every corner of the Steel Heart Thousand Spears Sacrifice barrier. Any spears that were snatched away were instantly shattered by the sandstorm into a scattering of energy. As more and more spears were shattered, Fangen finally succumbed to the backlash of the barrier's power. Puff! A large mouthful of blood spurted out, and the barrier enveloping the 3 men was finally broken, its silver barrier gradually dissolving. After wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth, Fangen tightly grasped the gun with both hands, slowly stood up, staring at the 3 people floating in the air, with a determined look on his face. The sandstorm stopped moving after defeating the Steel Heart Thousand Gun Festival, and began to spin on the spot. Fangen, you are a big shot, but you can't escape death today. Lu Xuan's voice was heard again. Fangen smiled contemptuously when he heard the words, "Come on, Lu Xuan. Let me see the strength of the Lord of a Fort who was defeated by our boss." Lu Xuan was silent for a moment when he heard the words, then flew out alone and looked down at Fangen, his tone even colder and more contemptuous. "It's ridiculous. If Liu Ming was not here, it would be enough for me to take his life today, but since he is not here, the grievance has its perpetrators, and I can only let you, the Ash Castle, pay with your lives." Chapter 295. Reinforcement arrive. Secret hand moves out. Lu Xuan slowly lowered his palm, and the sandstorm beneath him spun rapidly again. Its target was Fangen, whose aura was already weakening. A flicker of determination flashed in Fangen's eyes, and he pointed the tip of his spear at the incoming sandstorm. Given the sandstorm's speed, coupled with the fact that he had already been severely injured by the backlash from the Steel Heart Thousand Spears Festival, the situation was so volatile that it was impossible to evade it. Even if he could, he couldn't escape, as the second line of defense lay behind him. If he could evade it, all the defenders on the wall, including Kinai Wang Sucheng and the others, would surely perish. The only option now was to fight for his life. Block it, and live. Fail, and die. The sandstorm churned up countless gravel, instantly reducing houses along its path to rubble. The collapsed remains were borne high into the sky by the storm, creating a tremendous roar. Those on the wall, watching Fangen stand still before the sandstorm, were shocked and filled with bitterness. Faced with this 10-meter high, catastrophic sandstorm, everyone on the city wall was on the verge of despair. They naturally understood why Captain Steelheart Irangard had stubbornly stood in front, refusing to leave. Without him, the wall's defenses would be vulnerable to this catastrophic attack, and few would have escaped. Lu Zuan, whose life do you want? A clear voice called from afar. A figure in white, like a fairy from heaven, approached with swiftness, filling everyone with ecstasy. Before they arrived, a 10-meter long sword energy pierced the air, striking Lu Zuan, whose levitation was at the top of the sandstorm. The sword energy pierced the air with a piercing sound, arriving in an instant. Whoosh! At the sight of the sword energy splitting, Lu Zuan dodged into the sandstorm, not daring to face it directly. Boom! The sword energy instantly cleaved through the 10-meter high sandstorm, creating a gap over 10 meters long. The sandstorm's momentum towards Fangen faltered. That clear voice echoed again. Lu Zuan, why are you hiding? Aren't you asking us to die? Bitch, you're courting death. Lu Zuan's gritted teeth roared through the sandstorm. How dare you insult the big sister? Follow me, kill that bastard. Cut your mother to pieces. Can you even kill him? Let's kill all of that bastard's men. A sea of people followed the white-clad figure. Hearing Lu Zuan insult their goddess, they erupted in fury, eager to trample him beneath their feet. However, they knew Lu Zuan was beyond their power, so they wisely chose not to charge into the sandstorm and die, instead turning to attack the coalition forces. As the cavalry, the 12 Iron Guard captains, and many familiar figures appeared one after another, the tension in Kinu's mind on the city wall finally relaxed. Ma Jun, accompanied by 5 Iron Guard captains, approached Fangen and softly said, "You've been exhausted. Can you still fight?" He then fixed his gaze on Zeduo Heng and Yang Guan. "Just exhausted, what's the harm?" Hearing Fangen's affirmative response, Ma Jun and the Iron Guard captains showed no sign of fear, even facing 2 second-level evolvers. The biggest difference between second-level evolvers and first-level evolvers is their instantaneous burst of power. A second-level evolver can instantly kill a first-level evolver in a single burst, leaving them with no chance to fight back or fight back. But everyone knew that, as long as Fangen held on, they only needed to attack with all their might. Fangen would repel his attacks. Zeduo Heng sneered scornfully at the thought of Ma Jun, the second in command of Ash Castle, leading 6 5th-level S-rank evolvers and above, and the already half-crippled Fangen, daring to confront him. He spoke slowly to the empty space behind him. "The fish are already in the net. You two can take action." A red light flashed by, bringing with it a series of phantoms like flames, and stopped beside Zeduo Heng. Lai Yan transformed into a woman wearing a crimson bodysuit. Her figure was incredibly voluptuous, with curly hair and a curvaceous figure. She appeared behind Zeduo Heng, her arms clasping his shoulders. She smiled coquettishly. TSK, my great chief Zeduo, don't you think you can handle these little scoundrels, barely even at the first level, that you called us out?" Zeduo Heng's fingertips caressed the plump woman's smooth, fair face, and he replied with a forced smile, "Haha, dealing with these little scoundrels is easy with a little more maneuvering. I simply called you out to make a quick decision before we get caught up in the night by those returning. Hehe, great Chief Zeduo is so bold, touching me," the woman said with a shy laugh, only to appear half-hearted in matching his movements. Ma Jun, who had been watching Zeduo Heng warily, suddenly exclaimed, "Watch out." Rip. The woman who suddenly appeared, unexpectedly attacked without warning, while flirting with Zeduo Heng. The thorny dagger that was originally stabbed at the Iron Guard Captain Yun Fanghe was blocked by Fangen with his bare hands. Blood dripped down his palm. Even though he was covered with molten steel armor, the sharp thorns and blade of the dagger still penetrated the armor defense and injured Fangen. "Fangen, are you okay?" Yun Fanghe was the first to react. She knew that she was saved by Fangen. The knife just now was clearly a fatal blow to her. Ma Jun and the Iron Guard captain angrily swung their weapons to surround and kill the attacker. The woman in red drew out her dagger and retreated violently to avoid the siege. When she reappeared, she was at Zeduo Heng's side, smiling coquettishly. Haha, handsome boy, you actually blocked my blade for your lover. Then, she turned her gaze to Yun Fanghe and said bitterly, bitch, you won't be so lucky next time. Yun Fanghe glared back, her entire body engulfed in flames, like a flaming goddess of war. She gazed at the woman in red with undisguised murderous intent. Bitch, I hope you can still curse me later. Although she was baffled by the woman's intense hostility, it didn't diminish her hatred for her. If Fangen hadn't sacrificed himself to save her, she would have been seriously injured or even dead. Hearing Yun Fanghe call her a slut for the second time, the woman in red's expression changed, her charming face suddenly becoming terrifyingly gloomy. In a flash of red, she vanished from the spot she had once again. This time, Ma Jun and the others were prepared. They all blocked Yun Fanghe's path, protecting her within the human wall. Ping ping. The cavalry's long swords and the red-dressed woman's short blades clashed no fewer than 10 times in the blink of an eye, each collision sending the cavalry reeling back with immense force. When the lightning-fast clash ended, the cavalry retreated several steps before coming to a stop, while the red-dressed woman remained motionless. Yun Fanghe seized the opportunity and launched a column of fire at the red-dressed woman. Realizing she was out of control, she retreated again. Seeing her attempt to withdraw, several well-prepared Iron Guard captains converged and attacked, halting her retreat for a fraction of a second. During that fraction of a second, sparks from the column of fire still managed to strike the red-dressed woman, singeing strands of her hair. Ha ha ha, Feng Yu, it seems your strength has declined. Seeing the red-dressed woman's somewhat disheveled form, a burly man, dragging a long sword more than a meter tall with a miniature deer head inlaid on the hilt, trotted towards her from the coalition camp, laughing loudly as he approached. Dear Blade Bianze, Ma Jun asked solemnly. He didn't know the origins of the woman just now, but she was also a tier 2 evolutionary. As for the man wielding the deer-headed longsword, he was a household name among all the evolutionary professionals in Wuling, so he had naturally heard of him. The 5th tier 2 evolutionary. Chapter 296. Deer Knife Price, Rejection Conditions. Liu Bianze, a unique figure among the evolved classes in the Wuling region. The new humans, who gained powers far superior to those of ordinary humans during the apocalypse, have seen their previously hidden ambitions expand almost without limit in this new world, completely separated from the old. This world, once considered civilized, has shattered its seemingly benign facade under the unprecedented pressure of survival. In this land, shrouded in endless darkness, countless monsters lurking in the shadows and the constant threat of death have made it difficult for the surviving civilization to survive. Ordinary survivors can only rely on powerful evolved classes capable of protecting ordinary people for survival. As for the new humans, who wield extraordinary military power, a special class has emerged, centered around evolved classes. Not only in the survivor refuges and gathering places outside the safe zone, where one or more powerful evolved classes form the core, but even within the more orderly safe zones, where the laws of the dark jungle are less fully enforced, those with extraordinary powers have become a privileged class, completely different from ordinary people. Beneath this privilege lies the ever-expanding ambitions of the new humans. Among the smaller forts outside the safe zone, vaults like Ash Castle, which promote a degree of order and fairness, are extremely rare. Instead, vaults with brutal systems, even more akin to feudal despotism, are prevalent. Within their territories, leaders of Hurricane Castle, the Iron Fist Society, and the Sandstorm Society wield power over life and death, military affairs, and government like local tyrants. Furthermore, each vault leader is a powerful transcendent, making them unmatched within the entire vault. Consequently, their actions are even more unscrupulous than those of a feudal emperor. Furthermore, Liu Bianze, a powerful second-level evolved class, is rumored to have fought Nikang Song, the Wandering Dragon Blade, from the Eastern Safe Zone military and political faction 2 months ago, only to be defeated in a single blow and escape unscathed. This demonstrates his immense strength. Ni Kangsang is considered one of the top 5 experts in the Eastern Safe Zone military and political faction, a region teeming with experts and hidden talents. The fact that Liu Daobianze could fight him, almost to a draw, speaks volumes about his reputation. At least Ma Jun didn't consider himself a match for him. The disparity between a second level evolver and a first level evolver is undeniable. And even among second level evolvers, there are strengths and weaknesses. Liu Daobianze is undoubtedly one of the strongest among them. Ma Jun wasn't entirely sure of Zeduo Heng's strength, but having clashed with Yang Guan several times, he knew him well. In his opinion, even Yang Guan, a second level evolver, was no match for Liu Daobianze. If he couldn't withstand even 3 strikes from Liu Daobianze, Yang Guan would likely have to endure more than 10 before being defeated. Liu Daobianze's swordsmanship wasn't based on prolonged grappling, but rather on overwhelming force, like the terrifying force of a mountain torrent, crushing his opponent beyond all chance of resistance, and securing victory in a short burst. Otherwise, if it were any other second level evolver, Ma Jun wouldn't have thought he couldn't withstand even 3 attacks. Ma Jun gazed solemnly at Liu Daobianze, who strolled leisurely through the slaughter field, his expression heavy. What made him so different was that, while other second level evolvers were busy establishing their own territories and wielding immense power, he remained a lone ranger, navigating various factions, seemingly disdainful of authority and influence. His sole motive was sacrifice and divine favor, and the very best. In other words, Liu Daobianze was a supremely powerful individual who worked for a price. He would act for any faction or organization, as long as they offered a price that pleased him. And the price he paid was unbearably painful, even for a fellow second level evolver, and perhaps even difficult to part with. A second level demon's heart and head, and a white 3-star auxiliary divine favor item that perfectly complements my abilities, Liu Dao replied with a narrowed smile as he walked. Ma Jun's heart skipped a beat upon hearing this. Ash Castle could still afford just a second tier demon or devil, but if they were combined, the entire city couldn't even produce it. A second tier demon heart meant hunting down a second tier demon, and a second tier demon was always surrounded by legions of demons, making it impossible to kill, unless one possessed an absolute advantage. Over the past 6 months, the number of known second tier demons and devils killed in Wuling has never exceeded 50. Unexpectedly, Zeduo Heng and the others would offer sacrifices of this caliber, 2 at once, just to persuade Liu Daobianze. Ash Castle naturally had a stock of white 3-star items. After all, with a 4-color altar, the chances of receiving high-level divine grace from a sacrifice were higher than with lower-tier altars. However, even Ma Jun wouldn't guarantee that a supplementary divine grace item would be perfectly suited to the user. After all, second-tier divine grace items are currently at the highest level of divine grace, and their availability is limited, making the chances of finding a suitable match even smaller. Liu Daobianze looked at Ma Jun with a half smile and said, "Why, can you offer me a higher price? Then I might as well help you." Zeduo Heng and Wen Yan's expressions changed. It was no exaggeration to say that, if Liu Daobianze was indeed lured in with a higher price, today's battle would be even more uncertain. Furthermore, the possibility of Liu Dao turning against them was not low. He was a powerful man who worked for money, and they were not close personal friends. After a moment of internal struggle, he was about to offer a higher price. Ma Jun suddenly sighed and said, "I can't afford that. I don't need your sacrifices or divine grace. Just agree to one condition, and I will help you today." Liu Daobianze paused, put away his defiant smile, and said to Ma Jun with a hint of seriousness. Ma Jun frowned, perhaps guessing something, and asked calmly, "What condition?" "I want control of the 4-color altar." Liu Daobianze replied bluntly. Hearing this, Ma Jun snorted coldly and refused outright. Absolutely not. Why had Lu Zuan united several smaller forts to attack Ash Castle? While ostensibly seeking revenge against their leader, Liu Ming, he was actually driven by self-interest, hoping to obtain the 4-color altar. The 4-color altar belonged to Ash Castle, having been taken from the monsters at the dawn of the apocalypse by a man who had vanished for over half a year. He and his companions had risked their lives to seize it. Everyone in Ash Castle was remarkably united on this point. They would rather fight to the death than surrender the 4-color altar. Chapter 297, A Sudden Downturn, the final line of defense. As soon as Marjan finished speaking, Liu Ming, who had been walking leisurely, suddenly accelerated like a charging beast, dragging his Liu Dao on the ground, sparks flying, and slashed at Marjun. The several Iron Guard captains standing shoulder to shoulder with Marjan were all within the attack range of Liu Dao's blade. Fangen, dragging his seriously injured body, took a step forward and stood at the front of the group, tightly gripping his steel heart spear and staring intently at the attacking Liu Dao. Swish! The deer Dao slashed the spear shaft, sliding along the spear shaft, creating a series of dazzling sparks. The huge force transmitted from the deer Dao forced Fangen, who was in very poor condition, to retreat several steps, and the spear in his hand almost fell out of his hand. When Liu Dao's figure reappeared, he had returned to the position where he had just launched the attack. He stood there, a half smile, a hint of mockery at the sullen-faced Magier. He slowly said, "Since I can't reach an agreement with you, let me use my deer knife." He hefted the 2-meter-tall deer knife to his shoulder, his tone and gesture laced with murderous intent. Before anyone could catch their breath, a red phantom wielded a thorn dagger, striking Fangen again. Fangen, having lost his footing in the previous clash with the deer knife, had no power left. He could only twist his body to avoid the blade's vitals. Puff! Fangen was ultimately unable to withstand the blow, and the woman known as Sigi Fengayu stabbed him in the back. The blade had been aimed straight for his chest, but Fangen dodged it by sideways, allowing it to penetrate his shoulder blade. Otherwise, it would have pierced his heart. Haha, handsome boy, don't forget I'm here. Fengyu, after stabbing Fangen, retreated just in time as the furious crowd attacked. From a distance, his lips curled up, and he glanced provocatively at Yun Fanghua before tilting his head towards Fangen, whose wound was bleeding profusely. Seeing Fangen, who had repeatedly pushed him into a desperate situation, being severely injured by Fengyu, Yang Wan looked at his enemy with a look of excitement and bloodlust, saying, "Let's attack together and cut the Gordian knot. Don't let these guys cause any more trouble." Zeduo Heng also began to control the hurricane, ready to strike at any moment. 4 second-level evolutionary professionals stared at Fangen and his cavalry with eager eyes. The situation was precarious. Gong Weixin, still locked in a fight with Lu Zuan, saw the situation here, and her expression changed drastically. After repelling the sandstorm transformed by Lu Zuan with a single sword strike, he rushed over, blocking the 4 eager watching tier 2 evolvers. He whispered to those behind him, "Go. Retreat to the third line of defense. I'll hold them back." Hearing this, Marjan and the others hesitated. Naturally, they had unwavering faith in Gong Weixin's strength. Even when Liu Ming was still around, the question of who was stronger between Gong Weixin and him remained uncertain. Not to mention that after Liu Ming's mysterious disappearance, Gong Weixin's strength had skyrocketed. Even Fangen believed himself no match for this undisputed leader. Even his toughness was enough to keep him on the defensive. But now, facing him were 4 tier 2 evolvers. Adding Lu Zuan, that made a full 5. Meanwhile, Fangen, along with his 3 dragon pets capable of confronting tier 2 evolvers head on, was wounded and crippled, unable to offer any assistance. Gong Weixin was the only remaining fighting force. Marjan wasn't sure she'd single-handedly fend off 5 second-level evolvers, while she led the retreat to the third line of defense. The others were also hesitant. "Let's go. Are you staying here to die?" Gong Weixin shouted in desperation, watching her companions remain motionless. Marjan and the other 6 looked at each other in bewilderment. This was probably the first time they'd seen Gong Weixin lose her temper. "What about you?" Marjan remained uneasy. "As soon as you retreat to the third line of defense, I'll rush over to join you. Don't worry, I can't fight 5 alone, but I'm confident I can hold them back. If you don't leave, you'll only drag me down." Gong Weixin, without even turning back, walked towards Zeduo Heng and the other 4 with a determined look. She was enveloped in a pale cyan wind energy, resembling a god. What a touching exchange. Enough of the conversation. Let's send you on your way. Zeduo Heng sneered, unleashing a hurricane of sword energy towards fellow wind-wielding swordsman Gong Weixin. As a master of wind power and masterfully wielding sword energy, the moment Gong Weixin approached, he sensed this woman's affinity for wind far surpassed his own. Her evolutionary level shouldn't have been much higher than his, but he had unexpectedly developed a monstrous affinity for it. This infuriated the self-proclaimed King of Wind. His mastery of wind power and his confidence in it were evident in the fact that he named his territory Hurricane Fort. He hadn't expected to encounter a woman so superior to him in the art of wind today. Kill her. The thoughts whirled uncontrollably within Zeduo Heng's mind. Gong Weixin's expressionless face flicked a gentle wrist as she thrust her long sword forward, instantly shattering the incoming hurricane sword energy. The entire move was effortless, as if effortless shattering what most would consider a sure kill move. This sight intensified Zeduo Heng's fury. This woman had indeed effortless shattered his hurricane sword energy. The wind power within the hurricane sword energy, upon contact with the woman, transformed into pure wind energy, surging towards her like birds returning to their nests. Her sword, without expending a single ounce of energy, imbued it with sword energy, and shattered his own, now utterly depleted, hurricane sword energy. This woman is tough to deal with. Let's attack together. Zeduo Heng knew that with her ability to harness the destructive energy contained in his attack, he would be powerless. He shouted to his spectators, cursing inwardly. These so-called allies were merely temporary alliances of interest, and their mutual suspicions and mistrust made sincere cooperation impossible. Yang Wan secretly gloated at Zeduo Heng's defeat. You usually look down on me, he thought. But he was still the first to charge out. In this battle, everyone was sharing the same fate. Although there were still gaps between them, it wouldn't affect the final outcome. Cigui Fengyu and Lu Daobianze followed suit, and all four of them realized that this woman was definitely the most formidable opponent present. Ma Jun wanted to join the fight, but he inadvertently glanced at the severely injured Fangen and his 3 dying dragon pets. If the battle continued, the lives of the dragon pets and Fangen would be in jeopardy. Finally, he gritted his teeth and said, "Let's go." He murmured to Gong Weixin, who was facing the combined attack of 4 people alone, while also dealing with Lu Zuan, who was still watching closely from the sidelines. "Take care." With that, he immediately led his men out of the battle zone and retreated towards the wall. He also knew that indecision at this moment would be a taboo. The only option now was to trust Gong Weixin, not hesitate. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 298, Moonlight Priest, Healing Interception, 4,000 words. Once out of the fray, and handing the battle over to Gong Weixin, Ma Jun began directing his retreat. Chu Gang and several other Iron Guard captains retreated to their respective Iron Guard units, organizing their respective units' combatants to withdraw. Meanwhile, Ma Jun and Fangen rushed to the location of the 3 severely injured, immobile dragon pets. Sumi, Sumi. Ma Jun half knelt before Sumi, whispering. Sumi remained motionless, blood foaming from her mouth, and her entire body was lifeless. Her injuries were severe. Without urgent treatment, her chances of survival, let alone her ability to stand and retreat, would be at the mercy of fate. Just then, Iron Guard Captain Yun Fanghe, accompanied by a petite delicate girl, rushed forward, braving the enemy's swords. "Captain Yun, you've arrived at the perfect time." Seeing the newcomers, or more accurately, the petite girl, Ma Jun's face lit up with joy. "Fu Lingling, come quickly," he called anxiously. This petite girl was the strongest healer in Yun Fanghe's Iron Guard. While even this healer wouldn't be able to heal the severe injuries of someone at Sumi's level of evolution, she certainly could manage to help the critically injured and dying Sumi regain her strength and stand up to evacuate with her. Upon hearing this, Yun Fanghe hurried over with healer Fu Lingling. Seeing Fu Lingling finally look up, after observing Sumi's injuries for a moment, Ma Jun asked anxiously, "Are you confident you can stabilize her?" "Yes," Fu Lingling nodded, then thought for a moment, before shaking her head. Seeing the usually gentle girl still hesitating, Ma Jun shouted impatiently, "Can you stabilize the injury? If you can, say yes. If you can't, say no." "Deputy Chief, it depends on what kind of stabilization you need. If it's just getting Lady Sumi to stand up, I should be able to do it. But while this kind of standing up can be considered stabilization, it comes at the cost of overdrawing her vitality, commonly known as a last gasp. After this last gasp, Lady Sumi's injuries will worsen. Even a god might not be able to save her. Lady Sumi is too seriously injured. I really can't heal her in such a short time. As she spoke, the girl named Fulingling's eyes suddenly reddened. Most evolutionists had a close relationship with the 3 dragon pets. In the hearts of most, they were not just the guardian beasts of Ash Castle, but also family members and precious memories left by Liu Ming. Seeing Sumi suffering such a fatal injury, for which she was completely helpless and could only temporarily stave off death, Fulingling felt a pang of pain. After hearing the girl's description, Ma-Jun breathed a sigh of relief. His expression softened slightly as he explained, "You just need to help Sumi regain her feet. After we evacuate the final line of defense, I'll have them take Sumi to the altar for sacrifice and healing. You just need to stabilize her injuries and keep her from dying. Don't worry, Sumi won't die. I won't let either Jizeri-Rang or Afei die," Ma-Jun said solemnly. "I understand, Deputy Chief." Fulingling burst into laughter. "I'll treat Sumi and stabilize her injuries immediately." With that, Fulingling extended her hands. Her palms began to cover the most severe and hideous wounds on Sumi's body. Streams of milky white light shone down like moonlight. As the light fell, the wounds, drenched in blood and constantly corroded by the alien energy, gradually began to heal. The healing was only very slow, and even after healing, the wounds were being torn apart and damaged by the alien energy at an even faster rate. But this healing was clearly not in vain. Sumi's consciousness, previously in shock, was rapidly recovering. Her body, shrouded in a deathly aura, had surprisingly regained a touch of life and vitality. However, anyone could see that this wasn't recovery or restoration, but rather a last-ditch effort. Without the altar's divine healing power as a backup, Fulingling wouldn't have dared to resort to this temporary revival, stimulating the body's vital potential. If the healing wasn't complete before the recovery period ended, Sumi's chances of death would increase further, and her chances of survival would be significantly reduced. Fulingling continued to channel the milky white healing energy, which possessed healing properties. Each ray of this moonlight-like energy, as it fell upon the wounds on Sumi's body, caused a surge of blood, which quickly clotted. The alien destructive energies, like sealed monsters, were temporarily unable to wreak havoc. Fulingling knew this was only temporary. These alien destructive energies originated from a second-level evolutionary class, and were simply beyond the reach of an A-level healing evolutionary class like her. Moreover, her class, Moonlight Priestess, wasn't a purely supportive healing class, but rather a combat class focused primarily on healing. It was equivalent to a combat priest, a powerful class capable of buffing allies in battle, prioritizing combat with buffs as a secondary purpose. Her greatest buffing ability was the Moonlight Descent, which healed minor injuries on a large scale. Single-on-one healing wasn't her forte. Furthermore, her buffing abilities were particularly valuable in combat. For example, during combat, her moonlight could rapidly heal allies who were bathed in minor injuries. As for what she was doing now, she was simply using healing energy to stimulate her life potential, leveraging Sumi's already immense life potential to suppress the alien destructive energy that was constantly destroying her body and draining her vitality. Meow, roar, roar. Suddenly, Sumi's weak roar echoed amid the surprised expressions of Ma-Jun and Yun Fanghe, who were standing guard. Sumi's amber eyes flickered open, and she looked around in confusion, as if wondering why she wasn't dead yet. If memory served him correctly, the behemoth remembered having been nearly beaten to death by the enemy, even going into shock and unconsciousness from the severity of his injuries. "Captain Yun, quickly take Fulingling over there. Jizeri-Rang and Afei are in your care," Ma-Jun ordered immediately. He then addressed Sumi. "Sumi, follow me back to the defense line immediately." Sumi had only temporarily regained her mobility, her strength still quite weak. Ma-Jun had to escort her to a safe location in the rear, or else something could happen. Yun Fanghe had already pulled up Fulingling, who had been severely damaged, and hurried towards Jizeri-Rang. Jizeri-Rang's condition was now significantly different from Sumi's, and he wasn't far away either. Less than 300 meters away lay Jizeri-Rang. "Fangen, however, was already stationed beside Ji Zerong, awaiting the arrival of the healers. Seeing that it was Fu Lingling, the renowned moonlight priestess of Yun Fanghe and the entire Ash Castle, Fangen breathed a sigh of relief. Fangen was very trusting about the healing ability of the Yuhe priestess. He even had the idea of digging the Yuhe priestess to come to the Iron Guard several times. But every time she mentioned this just now, Yun Fanghe would reject it, claiming that the priestess of Yuhe Fu Lingling was the flesh of her entire Iron Guard and would beat anyone who dared to touch it. After Fu Lingling observed Ji Tirang's injury for a while, she also said something similar to what she said to Ma Jun. After hearing this, a trace of disappointment flashed through Fangen's heart. But Fu Lingling immediately asked him to seize the time to stabilize Ji Tirang's injury. Ji Tirang's body is 2 or 3 stories high. He was also covered in bruises and even had energy and gravels ravaged and destroyed in each wound. Fu Lingling squatted beside Ji Zerong and healed his wounds, which was tantamount to a baby standing beside the giant Liu Ming. And Chicken-Rong, who was also in shock and coma, subconsciously made a comfortable snoring sound when the moon was healing. Everyone was stunned. Because Ji Zerong was much larger, his wounds were correspondingly more numerous. Therefore, Fu Lingling spent twice as long as Sumi to stabilize Ji Zerong. When Ji Zerong regained his feet, Yun Fanghe, on command, led him back to the defensive line. Fangen, meanwhile, protected Fu Lingling as they raced towards Afei, the last of the dragon pets, the least injured and most powerful, the winged claw dragon snake. Despite suffering several heavy wounds in the previous battle, the winged claw dragon snake, with its exceptionally powerful devouring talent, had devoured and refined the destructive alien energy like a maggot, transforming it into the purest energy to replenish itself. This was the fundamental reason the dragon snake hadn't suffered serious injuries. In a battle of this magnitude, even the smallest strikes played a crucial role, and the decisive factor was the destructive effect of the energy damage. Direct attacks on the enemy were only truly effective in the swift blows of the sword and blade. It was the hidden destructive power of the alien energy that truly weakened and ultimately defeated the enemy. When Fu Lingling reached the dragon snake, it lay helplessly on a pile of rubble. Although it was the least injured of the 3 dragon pets, not near death or in shock, it was still in a state of severe injury, even unable to move. The dragon snake's large head rested limply on the rubble. Only when Fu Lingling and Fangen approached did the dragon snake glance at them. Confirming they were its companions, its previously defensive attitude softened. Fu Lingling's slender hands gently brushed across the dragon snake's wounds. Its scales were shattered, and the blood-soaked hideous wounds quickly healed. As the dragon snake recovered in the moonlight, even its shattered wings fluttered and took flight, cheering its companions, both those observing the situation from the distant walls and those in the nearby battle circle. The moment the winged claw dragon snake soared back into the sky, its majestic presence only intensified the relentless cheers. All Iron Guards, immediately withdraw from the front lines and retreat to the second line of defense. Can you immediately respond and lead the defenders in batches to the final line of defense? We will temporarily take over the defense of the second line. I repeat, can you immediately respond and arrange for the evacuation of the second line of defense? We will take over the second line of defense. Seeing the last of the dragon pets, the winged claw dragon snake Afei also flapped its wings and soared high. Ma Jun forced a smile and issued the order. Seeing that the Ash Castle Iron Guards, who had been fighting fiercely with the coalition forces, wanted to make a final move, Lu Zuan, who had been observing the situation, shouted with a grim smile, "Want to leave?" Then, the Sandstorm Castle leader suddenly conjured a massive sandstorm, sweeping towards the people fleeing to the third line of defense. Even before the sandstorm arrived, those still fleeing could feel the approaching dust storm, like blades of wind and sand, slicing painfully at their faces. Gong Weixin was now trapped by 4 men, fighting alone. While not dominant, she was not at all disadvantaged. The fierce sword intent and energy from each strike instilled fear in the 4 men she engaged. They found it hard to believe that such a fierce power could come from a swordsman of their own caliber. Even facing 4 men alone, Gong Weixin still had the energy to observe the movements of Lu Zuan, who had yet to strike. As Lu Zuan whipped up a sandstorm, sweeping towards his retreating companions. Gong Weeksin, like a celestial being, flashed like a bolt of lightning, intercepting the sandstorm Lu Zuan had transformed into. She coldly declared, "Lu Zuan, your opponent is me. Before you completely defeat or even kill me, I urge you not to distract yourself from dealing with my companions, but to focus on fighting me." As her words left her mouth, a piercing stream of pale blue sword energy emanated from her long sword. It collided fiercely with the relentlessly charging sandstorm, halting its seemingly unstoppable advance. "Bitch, do you really think I can't kill you?" Lu Zuan, intercepted by Gong Weeksin's sword strike once again, was so angry that he nearly spat blood, his curses echoing through the sandstorm. Gong Weeksin ignored his curses and simply said coldly, "You can try." With that, she unleashed 2 more slashes of sword energy, sending sandstorms flying. 2 gaping holes over 10 meters long appeared in the oncoming Shabao. Seeing Gong Weeksin escape their combined force and block Lu Zuan, Yang Guan, Zeduo Heng, and the other 3 all looked grim. The woman's sudden disappearance was so swift they couldn't even grasp it with the naked eye. Her speed was terrifying. However, no matter how fast she was only a early stage evolver. How could she compare to the 4 of them? She was so arrogant as to challenge 5 on her own. Defeat was only a matter of time. All 5 were powerful figures in their respective regions, and they shared this confidence. Yang Guan, transformed into a giant star blue tiger, pounced first. Gong Weeksin once again vanished in a flash of white light, leaving Yang Guan empty-handed. Bang! Instead of striking Gong Weeksin, Yang Guan was nearly stabbed by her counterattack. Fortunately, Zeduo Heng swung his sword just in time, blocking Gong Weeksin's counterattack. Otherwise, that attack would have been enough to severely injure Yang Guan. Although Zeduo Heng blocked the attack for Yang Guan, he sneered with a grim expression, "Be careful, everyone. This woman is no ordinary woman. One wrong move could lead to a fatal accident. P.S. This is a 4,000-word chapter, so I'm not going to split it into 2 separate chapters for uploading." Chapter 299, 1 vs 5, Seriously Injured, Part 1. Gong Weeksin's hastily dodged sword energy was shattered by Zeduo Heng, but the shattered wind breath sword intent within it shattered into sharp fragments. Some of these fragments clattered against Yang Guan. Though blocked by the giant tiger phantom before him, they still sent ripples through the energy phantom, flickering and pulsing, hinting at the shattering of his protective energy. This startled Yang Guan. Even a sword energy completely shattered by the sword intent possessed such power. If Zeduo Heng hadn't blocked the blow with all his might, it would have struck him hard, and he would have been seriously injured. His gaze towards Gong Weeksin once again was no longer composed and confident, but now filled with solemnity. The other 4 also regarded Gong Weeksin as if they were facing a formidable enemy. The sword energy just now completely overturned everyone's understanding of him. The sword intent, like a subtle storm of thunder and lightning, still unleashed such destructive power even after the sword energy that carried it was shattered. This person's mastery of sword energy surpassed everyone's understanding. It could no longer be judged by common sense. Feng Yu and Lu Dao Bianze calmly moved closer, one wielding a short sword, the other a long, working together to block Gong Weeksin's retreat. After being rescued by Zeduo Heng, Yang Guan immediately swooped in close, forming a horn-like formation with Zeduo Heng, one on each side, blocking Gong Weeksin's flanks. Meanwhile, the massive sandstorm transformed by Lu Zuan spun at an even faster rate, blocking Gong Weeksin's path. The combined efforts of the 5 men completely blocked Gong Weeksin's path forward and retreat, their combined strength finally completing the encirclement. Lu Zuan, undoubtedly the strongest of the 5, spoke, his voice a deep voice echoing through the sandstorm curtain. "Don't worry about anything else, just kill this bitch first. Those guys are just trapped beasts fighting back, and we'll be dealt with sooner or later." With that, a massive sandstorm erupted like a raging Tyrannosaurus Rex, sweeping up all the debris and rubble in the surrounding area, and crashing down towards Gong Weeksin. The other 4 retreated, fearing they would be caught in the sandstorm's clutches. Even as they dispersed, they remained firmly stationed around Gong Weeksin. If she tried to avoid the sandstorm by breaking through them, they would surely be repelled. To their astonishment, Gong Weeksin didn't dodge or evade, but instead used advance as a retreat. Gripping her sword with both hands, she leaped with all her might, the concrete floor cracking beneath her feet. Using the recoil, Gong Weeksin soared high into the air. With the tip of her sword pointed forward, she pierced the massive sandstorm like a razor-sharp sword. Anyone else daring to confront a sandstorm head-on with a sword would have been considered a fool. But when Gong Weeksin thrust her sword forward, darting towards the storm, their hearts sank. When Gong Weeksin was less than 10 meters from the outermost layer of the sandstorm, a dazzling, azure sword energy erupted from her body. The overwhelming force of the energy instantly enveloped Gong Weeksin, and she, enveloped by the aura, transformed into a vast, azure sword, soaring towards the sandstorm. Though the azure sword, only a few meters long, seemed as small as a cat or dog standing at the feet of an elephant against the tens of meter high sandstorm, the instantaneous burst of wind-breathing sword energy stunned everyone who witnessed it. At that moment, the sword's momentum completely overwhelmed the sandstorm. The azure blue great sword, upon contacting the outer layer of the sandstorm, pierced through the dust barrier like a knife cutting through tofu, piercing into the center. Liu Ming, who was manipulating the sandstorm's attack, naturally saw Gong Weeksin's azure blue great sword coming. However, he was now in a dilemma. Unable to let go, he could only charge forward, hoping that Gong Weeksin's great sword wasn't as sharp or powerful as he'd imagined. With Gong Weeksin's physique and defense, if that flesh and blood being were struck by her incarnation, it would undoubtedly be severely injured, perhaps even annihilated on the spot. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. A harsh sound, like a knife scraping against sandpaper, echoed through the sandstorm. The azure great sword, like a long sword rubbing against a whetstone, continued to advance amidst the pounding sand. Though its speed slowed the closer it got to the center of the sandstorm, it continued its relentless advance. In just a few breaths, as those outside the sandstorm watched nervously, Gong Weeksin's transformed great sword had already pierced nearly a third of the way through the sandstorm, drawing ever closer to its center. Ruzan, directly in the direction of the great sword's advance, saw an increasingly anxious look in his eyes. A hint of struggle crossed his features. Finally, even after the great sword had pierced the sandstorm's barrier, and watching the azure great sword, though slowing but still relentlessly charging towards him, Ruzan finally dodged and left the center of the sandstorm. He had a premonition that, if he didn't leave, he might actually be struck by the great sword, instantly slain. A gentleman's fate is not to be found within a wall. He hadn't gained the upper hand in this encounter, but he had allies. With the combined strength of 5, he had no doubt he couldn't defeat her. With Liu Ming gone, the sandstorm suddenly lost its command. From a tightly controlled, impenetrable army, it became a loose mass. In a flash, Gong Weeksin broke through the remaining sandstorm, her azure giant sword piercing through it. Seeing Gong Weeksin break through their encirclement with such ferocious force, the 5 of them looked dismayed. The others knew that, if they didn't attack now, they would be defeated one by Gong Weeksin's desperate struggle. Finally, they set aside their past grudges and attacked simultaneously. With astonishing force, Liu Ming dragged his deer-head knife along the ground, sparks flying, and a scorched groove, an elbow deep, scorched black, ripped through the concrete. Then, the deer-head knife transformed into a flash of lightning, striking Gong Weeksin before Liu Ming could. Liu Ming's figure only appeared behind the deer-head knife after it had struck. Gong Weeksin had just transformed into a giant azure sword, piercing the sandstorm. Her strength was spent, and she was struggling to cope with Liu Ming's blow. Liu Ming was a swordsman known for his explosive power. With a bang, Gong Weeksin collided head-on with Liu Ming and was thrown back over 10 meters. Finally, she stabilized herself by burying her sword into the ground beneath her feet. However, this series of sudden changes left Gong Weeksin with a sweet taste in her throat, and she spat out a stream of blood from the shockwaves. Her once heroic aura suddenly waned. It seems you're not invincible after all, Liu Ming, who had scored with one strike, said slowly, his eyes as sharp as a hawk scouting its prey, fixed on Gong Weeksin. He had no intention of pressing on. Chapter 300, 1 vs 5, Seriously Injured, Part 2. Liu Ming knew full well that his recent success with a single strike was largely due to him taking advantage of the moment when the opponent had just broken through the massive sandstorm Liu Zuan had painstakingly conjured, leaving him with no leverage. Otherwise, in a head-on confrontation, the mere sight of this woman withstanding his all-out blow, unaided and only slightly injured, would have proven her immense strength. He was a renowned swordsman, yet this woman, clearly not particularly strong physically, only felt a slight weakening. In Liu Daobian's mind, Gong Weixin's assessment had shifted from a formidable opponent to a supremely skilled one. Upon hearing this, Gong Weixin remained silent, a silent voice. She slowly unsheathed her long sword, seemingly driven deep into the concrete beneath her feet. Then, grasping the sword with one hand, she slashed with 3 gusts of wind-breathing sword energy, each 3 or 4 meters long and nearly a meter wide. 3 pale cyan sword energies formed a triangular formation and attacked Liu Daobianze, completely blocking his path and forcing him to resist head-on. While not as powerful as the azure sword energy emanating from Gong Weixin's form, these 3 pale cyan sword energies were nonetheless quite potent. This was evident from the moment Zhuo Heng, with all his might, blocked that sword energy for Yang Guan. Liu Daobianze had initially assumed that Gong Weixin, having withstood his attack head-on, would, if not lose her combat effectiveness, at least need to recover her damage ki in blood. However, she hadn't attacked him the moment she had regained her balance. He was momentarily shocked. It seemed he had underestimated this woman. She was undoubtedly a formidable foe. However, Liu Daobianze showed no regrets about taking on such a formidable foe for a mere reward. Instead, his fighting spirit surged, even exhilarated. Putting aside his own strength, he was already superior to Zhuo Heng and the other 2, and perhaps only slightly weaker than that unfathomable Liu Zuan. Just look at our side. There are 5 full-fledged second-level evolvers, while the enemy has only 1. We can wear them down through sheer attrition. While the enemy is strong, to defeat 5 alone requires more than just a burst of fighting power. More importantly, sustained combat power. Even a relentless battle wouldn't spare them. The only thing to worry about is this woman's eerie speed. We must not let her escape. As long as she remains within our grasp, she's doomed. The muscles in Liu Daobianze's arms, legs, and back bulged like air. An overwhelming force erupted, and the ground beneath his feet cratered in the instant, sending rubble flying everywhere. The deer head knife in his hand shimmered with a faint, dark purple hue. Swish, swish, swish. In the blink of an eye, the deer head knife swung 3 times in quick succession, shattering 3 streams of wind-breathing sword energy in an instant by the subtle purple aura emanating from the deer head knife's blade. Boom, boom, boom. Every time he shattered a wind-breath sword energy, Liu Daobianze's form was buffeted by the immense force, forcing him to step back before dissipating the impact and stopping himself. By the time all 3 sword energies were shattered, he had already retreated 3 full steps. As he slowly lowered his deer head knife, a gurgling sound emanated from his mouth, clearly wounded by the shock waves, just as Gong Weixin had been earlier. But, you're doing fine. Liu Daobianze's face darkened, his fury boiling. His face flushed crimson. It wasn't just the humiliation of being knocked back and injured after attacking first. It was also the turmoil of his blood and energy from the 3 previous outbursts. Having shattered 3 sword energies in a row, Liu Daobianze realized how ridiculous it was for them to have underestimated this woman's strength. The 2 close-range encounters convinced him that this woman's power level was probably comparable to his own, at most a small level higher. Yet, every one of her attacks was imbued with a terrifying sword intent. That sword intent imbued each of her attacks with greater, more swift, explosive, and destructive power. It was the power of the wind. Only those who had achieved a high level of control over the wind could unleash such sword intent. Seeing their ally injured, Zhuo Heng and Yang Guan exchanged a glance and joined forces. One of them transformed into a giant star blue tiger, and the phantom blue starry sky descended once more, enveloping the world around Gong Weixin. The tip of Yang Guan's sword, gathering a dense, ribbon-like wave of white air, condensed into a powerful suction-filled storm of sword energy. With a thrust of his sword, the storm in the giant star blue tiger, transformed by Yang Guan, simultaneously attacked Gong Weixin. Gong Weixin's eyes were stern, neither joy nor sorrow, nor any trace of fear. He joined forces again, thrusting out two sword strikes in quick succession. Each thrust was accompanied by a pale blue sword energy. The sword energy clashed with the giant star blue tiger, and the tiger's sharp claws were wiped out in a series of sparks the moment they first touched the blade. When the second sword strike came, the tiger's claws were instantly sliced apart like a fork through butter. A rapid burst of blue aura emanated, and the aura of the giant azure tiger wilted. Seeing this, Yang Wan retreated, fearing serious damage from the sword energy. Zhuo Heng's fierce sword energy storm, however, collided with the pale blue energy from Gong Weixin's sword tip like burning charcoal thrown into a fire. It posed no threat, but only intensified the flames. Finally, it was Gong Weixin who thrust, not Zhuo Heng, who struck, frightening Zhuo Heng to the point of fear, and he quickly dodged. Just as both were being driven back by Gong Weixin's attack, a ball of gravel from Lu Zuan's hand flew into the air, transforming into a sandstorm dragon, which attacked Gong Weixin. Gong Weixin's two consecutive sword energies failed to destroy the sandstorm dragon, but instead became entangled in it, engaging it in a series of exchanges. Although each strike could shatter the sandstorm dragon's body, it only consumed its energy, preventing a single strike from achieving its full potential. At that moment, a red figure streaked through the air like a flash of crimson lightning. Gong Weixin was prepared. While her right hand was still engaged in the lingering sandstorm dragon, she formed her left index and middle fingers into a sword gesture. Her flesh and blood body swung back, unleashing a stream of sword energy at the red figure. With a whiz, the sound of a sharp weapon piercing flesh echoed. The red figure, still mid-air, suddenly sprouted white wings from its back. With a strange arc, it dodged the incoming wind breath sword energy. Instead, it swiftly flapped its wings, accelerating rapidly. Before Gong Weixin could react, it thrust its dagger into her back. A bloody flower bloomed in mid-air. Feng Yu's elbow-length dagger reached its hilt, its sharp edge nearly piercing Gong Weixin's back. With a swish, after severely wounding the enemy she saw, Feng Yu immediately flapped her wings and flew backwards. As an assassin, her direct combat abilities were already inferior to those of the other four. She had no confidence in her ability to withstand the sharp sword energy of this terrifyingly powerful woman without getting hurt. If she stabbed her now, facing the inevitable violent outburst, she would have no choice but to flee. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.